Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Today we'll examine what happened in the US state of California in 2011. Dalene Carlson, a 23-year-old college student, relocated from Idaho to Stockton, California. She was looking forward to beginning a new chapter in her life while residing at her Aunt Maggie's house. But she never came home after going out to meet some friends on August 6, 2011. Beginning at 3:30 a.m. on August 7, her aunt called her multiple times but got no response. Worried, she informed the police about Dalene's disappearance. To find the truth, detectives started an investigation and used CCTV footage. Dalene was preparing to go out on Saturday night. Her cousin Cecily had plenty of time to acquaint her with the local nightlife, as college was still 3 months away. Cecily had a fever, so they stayed home instead of going to the Finnegan's pub to meet up with some more friends. Dalene had to return home by 1 in the morning after going to the bar by herself, but Maggie and Aggie started to worry when 1 in the morning rolled around and Dalene was still not home. Maggie repeatedly called Colleen but got no answer. Maggie stayed up all night calling Colleen's number every now and then, but as before, her niece didn't answer. Maggie searched for a plausible reason why Colleen hadn't come home. Dalene hadn't come home by morning, so she speculated that her niece might have spent the night at a friend's house. Maggie called the police when she realized she could not wait any longer. Despite receiving a report, the police believed Dalene had stayed at a friend's house following the party and would soon return. The investigators made the decision to hold off a bit longer. In the meantime, Dalene's family started their own inquiry. On social media, they announced Dalene's disappearance and urged anyone with information to get in touch with the police or her family. The day after Dalene's disappearance, August 8, 2011, the police opened an official investigation because her family suspected something terrible might have happened because it was out of character for her to simply vanish without warning anyone. Her Aunt Maggie's home was the first location the detectives visited. They wanted to talk to Dalene's relatives, see her in her room, and make sure none of them had anything to do with her disappearance. Danielle was a girl, like any other American. Her disappearance was extremely unusual, and she was young, attractive, and had big plans for the future. Detectives searched Dalene's room, but they found no evidence that she had fled her house. Her room contained all of her possessions, as well as a few documents. Cecily took a picture of Dalene wearing torn jeans and a brown and white striped top the night she vanished. Cecily informed Detective Dalene that they had frequently visited the Finn Pub's pub in the past, and that Dalene had planned to go there. The detectives then went to the bar to speak with the employees and perhaps obtain additional information. On the night Dalene vanished, the bar manager recalled seeing her in the street at around midnight. He described what had happened that evening, but he could not think of anything out of the ordinary. Thankfully, security cameras were present. Surveillance footage can greatly aid an investigation, even though it might not give a full picture. 2 operational security cameras in the bar recorded hours of Saturday night activity. The detectives made the decision to obtain a copy of the recordings and go over everything back at the police station, because it would have taken a long time to go through the footage. This, they hoped, would allow them to find out who Dalene had slept with, and more crucially, with whom she had left the bar. At first look, the tape appeared to be normal. On the street, young women and men congregated, smoking and chatting. It appeared to be a typical Saturday night in a pub, but they are drawn to one girl in particular. She's dressed in a striped top similar to the one from the day. Dalene is wearing a striped top in the final photo. She goes back to the bar at 1:40 and 0 in the morning. Another security camera is located inside, in the corridor close to the restrooms. Photo 41 is watched by detectives. After 61 minutes, she was observed consuming alcohol. She might have been a bit more exposed than normal. In a hallway full of young men, she is the only woman. Every person in this video could be a suspect, and even if they are not, they might be a witness. Dalene seems content and at ease as she watches the video. At 0:40 in the morning, detectives see a young man approaching her from behind and placing his arm around her waist, indicating that someone is about to approach too closely. A short while later, as she was going into the bathroom, a man with a beard and an outfit that was backwards passed her. Dalene, who was not particularly disturbed by the young man's presence, also didn't seem very happy to see him. As soon as they saw this video, The detectives knew they needed to find this man, so they talked to her friends and neighbors. They discovered once more that Jason Gilley was the man who had Dalene around his waist. Jason was well known to Dalene Cecily's cousin Cecily and her friends, who frequently got together at his house for an enjoyable evening. Investigators found Jason Gilley's home and spoke with him. They questioned him about where he was when Dalene vanished that night. Jason clarified that he had planned to take Dalene home after spending the evening with her, but he had to leave early due to his child's needs. Jason claimed that he came home by himself. He claimed that because his young son was ill, he left the bar at around 1 in the morning and got home at 1:30. He brought up another possible suspect. Jason suggested to the detectives that they should speak with Evangelisti. According to him, Evangelisti was seeing Jacob Evangelisti, but they had a fight in front of Jason 4 days prior to her disappearance. Because jealousy frequently leads people to act rashly, the detectives were interested in this information. Thus, they made the decision to learn more about Jacob Evangelisti. The investigators discovered some recent images of Jacob while searching through Dalene's social media accounts. To find out if Jacob was present, they made the decision to watch the bar's security footage again. They changed the video at 1:06, when Dalene left the eatery and went up to the man who was leaning against the wall. Dalene's behavior appears to drastically change when he is around. She seems to be very upset about something, as evidenced by the vigorous hand movements. The investigators attempt to determine whether it might be her boyfriend Jacob, but the bright lights make it impossible to see his face. After a few seconds of their brief conversation, Dalene left, leaving the detectives to keep watching and trying to figure out who the mystery man was. They finally recognize him as Jacob Evangelisti when he turns to face the camera. During the interview, detectives brought Jacob Evangelisti in to be questioned. Jacob appeared to be quite upset. He was asked about his relationship with Dalene by the detectives, who specifically wanted to know when and how he had last seen her. Jacob claimed that he and Dalene had last seen each other at a bar. Jacob disclosed that Dalene had ended their relationship that evening at Negan's bar. "I had no intention of ending my relationship with Dalene," he said. To be honest, he was furious that she had ended their relationship. Dalene had left the bar without him, Jacob later said. He adamantly denied any involvement in her disappearance. After that, the investigators reviewed the CCTV footage to see if it supports his account. Jacob walks into the bar at 1:09 in the morning. They keep on observing. Dalene enters the picture after Dalene. She seems to be bidding one of the patrons farewell. She then exits the frame at 1:15 a.m. The detectives kept going over the video until the bar had closed and all of the patrons had left. The lights go out at 2:38 a.m. When Day Nether appears again, the parking lot is almost deserted. It appeared that Jacob was responsible for Dalene's disappearance at this stage of the investigation. Investigators have not yet found any evidence that her disappearance was the result of foul play, but it's possible that he just couldn't move on from the fact that she had left him. Dalene's family is searching on their own, according to Dalene. They created flyers and began distributing them throughout the city. They wanted as many people as possible to know about Dalene's disappearance. After she left the bar, she might have been spotted by someone. Detectives ask Evangelisti if anyone knows what happened to her at the stock station. Evangelisti wants more, but he maintains his denial of any knowledge. James, another person in Dalene's social circle, is the name he gives instead. Dalene claims to have a new boyfriend. Dalene's social circle also includes James. They had a relationship, even though James wasn't Dalene's boyfriend. James was also a close friend, which was another interesting fact. Jason Gilley's pal. They actually shared the same home. Dalene's ability to enter into such a relationship and then vanish almost instantly afterward was highly intriguing. This sparked intense suspicion about James and the idea that he might have had something to do with her disappearance. James was asked to talk about his relationship with Dalene at the police station. Although he acknowledges that he and Dalene were romantically involved, he says he has no knowledge of the night she went to the bar. James had information he wanted to share, but he claimed to have been out of town when the police began looking into his alibi. He informed investigators that Dalene texted him to let them know she was with a new man after she disappeared. James verified that Dalene was there by showing the detectives his phone, which was Dalene's. Detectives came up with a new theory after she wrote that she was leaving the bar to go to a friend's party. but the friend's identity was still unknown. It is likely that Dalene had to visit the grocery store or the liquor store in order to continue the party. A list of 24-hour liquor stores has been compiled by investigators. Elis was the name of the store that was closest to Finnegan's. When detectives arrived, they discovered that a Dalene was equipped with security cameras. The security cameras recorded Dalene if she was there. The detectives began watching the security camera footage outside. When Dalene saw her walking into the store with a young man, their suspicion was confirmed. However, who was he? Since the video only captured his back, a precise identification was not possible. Dalene and her enigmatic companion purchased what appeared to be a bottle of alcohol as the detectives started going over the footage from the other cameras. At 1:31 a.m., they waited for them to leave the store before switching back to the exterior camera. Detectives have a better picture after the couple leaves the store. The first face the detectives saw in the bar footage was the same as the one with the baseball cap and goatee on backwards. This gave them a new lead for their ongoing investigation when Jason Gilley noticed it. Jason initially claimed to investigators that he went home alone at 1:30 a.m. to tend to his ailing son after leaving Finnegan's bar. It was now evident to the police that he and Dalene had left the liquor store at 1:31 in the morning. Jason became the prime suspect right away because he had lied about leaving the bar by himself. Jason Gilley was taken into custody by the police 1 week after Dalene vanished. After an hour or so of waiting, the detectives started questioning him while keeping an eye on any behavioral changes. The detectives went over Jason's account of what transpired that evening without disclosing that they had a tape recording of Jason's shopping excursion at night. They asked him to recall the time he left the bar and arrived home. Jason lied once more, claiming that he got a text from his grandmother at 1 in the morning and went home to see how his son was doing. The detectives then told him that they had spoken to his grandmother, who denied any involvement in the night. Jason admitted to the detectives that night that he had gone home by himself to spend time with his son and that his grandmother had not gotten in touch with him. Jason repeated his claim that he left alone and came home, after telling another lie when asked who he left with. The detectives realized that Jason was putting himself in a situation he would never be able to get out of. They claimed to have surveillance footage that refuted all of his claims. Jason then acknowledged that he had left the bar with Dal for less, to buy her a bottle of Jägermeister and to eat for less. However, he claimed to have driven her back to the bar before leaving for home. He claimed it slipped his mind when detectives questioned him about why he had lied about a crucial detail, such as the fact that Dalene had left with Dalene. Dalene claims that he invited her to stay the night on his couch and she agreed. He acknowledged that he and Dalene had had intimate contact and that they shared a Jägermeister. After he explained it to Dalene became upset, said it shouldn't have happened, and sobbed as he went home. Jason related a news story about how they got into a fight early on Sunday morning while he was driving Dalene home. He picked up his grandmother on the corner close to his house and got into her car. She tried to get out of the car just before they arrived at Dalene's house. Dalene Karengrein was upset and yelled to be allowed to get out of the car for the duration of the 30 to 45-minute drive. She said she couldn't believe Jason had done this and called him a piece of garbage. Jason claims that the last time he saw Dalene, she got out of the car and fled when he pulled over. The interview ended when Jason insisted on having a lawyer. Gilley was not charged by the police because they did not have enough evidence. Gilley had no choice but to let him go. Jason went to the police station on August 22, 2011, after being released on August 18, 2011, to report that his wallet had been stolen or lost. Upon seeing him, detectives investigating Dalene's disappearance were taken aback. Jason was approached by Detective Robert Fain, who asked him to accompany him on a retracement of the path he took on the day Dalene vanished. Jason consented and led the detective to the spot where Dalene is said to have jumped out of the car and run away. When the detective questioned Jason about why he didn't try to apprehend her, Jason said that he had to return home because the car behind him was honking, so he got back on the freeway. Then Jason explained that he had been looking for Lean for 10 or 15 minutes, but he had to leave because his gas tank was nearly empty. To get gas, he drove to Stockton's Archie Road. The detective went to the gas station with no fresh leads. Luckily, security cameras were in place. There, at 10:46 a.m. on August 7, 2011, Jason pulled over at the gas station on Archie Road exit on Highway 99 in Stockton, according to surveillance footage. It had been 9.5 hours since he had last taken a video at the Dalene liquor store. Jason appeared to be acting normally at first, but the inconspicuous gesture caught our attention. Jason appears to be unclean. Jason's shirt and arm are covered in dirt. He seems to be shaking his shoulders at one point. This conduct seems very suspicious. Before leaving the gas station, Jason checks the passenger door before getting into his car and walking back to it. He opens the passenger door once more and slams it shut after 20 seconds. Dalene was the last person to use that door, he said. At last, he takes off in his car. Detectives have developed a new theory after seeing this footage. Their theory is that Dalene took Dalene to a field south of Stockton and, in a hurry, physically pulled her out of the car, causing the front passenger door to jam. Dalene thought that she was dead, but they told her that in order to arrest Jason. Dalene was still missing, and Jason was out and about interviewing representatives. The case then underwent a sea change on October 15, 2011, more than 2 months after Dalene's disappearance. A farmer made a tragic discovery in a field 20 miles outside of Stockton. According to court documents on the 15th of 2011, human remains, later identified as Dalene, were found in a cornfield approximately 64 feet from Lone Tree Road in the Escalon. That afternoon, senior criminalist Sarah Yoshida of the Department of Justice was sent to the crime scene. A skull, ribs, jaw, vertebrae, and bones from the feet and legs were among the many bones discovered by Yoshida. She also discovered a clump of hair and a human torso. Cases of 522 caliber cartridges were discovered just southeast of the location of the human remains, and a black bra was discovered between the remains and Lawn Road. Dr. Bennett Omalu, the medical examiner for San Joaquin County, arrived at the crime scene at approximately 9 p.m. that evening. He ordered an 18-inch excavation of the ground beneath the body as soon as he saw it. After securing the soil in a body bag and x-raying it, we discovered 222 caliber bullets in the excavated soil. An AUI was conducted on Dalene's remains by Dr. Omalu. He claimed that Dalene was shot in the cornfield where her remains were discovered, and that either the bullets passed through her body and lodged in the ground just beneath her, or they remained inside the body and fell out as it decomposed. In either case, there was a gunshot wound to the backhead. Based on the location of the gunshot wound and the fact that Dalene's fingernails, jewelry, and nails were tangled in her hair, Dr. Omalu believed that when Dalene was shot, she had her hands and fingers wrapped around her head. Omalu came to the conclusion that Dalene's death was caused by a gunshot wound to the head, with gunshot wounds to the trunk also playing a role. Additionally, he believed that her body's decomposition supported her death on August 7, 2011. In the murder of Dalene, investigators had a top suspect. Detectives also found that Jason had access to a Jennings 22.2 semi-automatic handgun that belonged to one of his relatives, according to court documents. The gun's involvement in Dalene's shooting was verified by ballistics testing. Jason Gilley was arrested by authorities when he was eventually taken into custody. On the evening of Saturday, August 6, 2011, Dalene went to a bar to meet some friends, and investigators developed their theory about what happened the night she vanished. Among them was Jason Gilley. Dalene was convinced to come to Jason Gilley's house. On their way to Jason's house, they made a stop at a liquor store. This liquor store is where we last saw Dalene alive. Nothing seemed to be bothering her based on this footage, but after she and Jason left the store, things started to happen that ultimately resulted in her death. Dalene was naked when her body was discovered by investigators. Because of this, authorities concluded that she didn't want to have an intimate relationship with Jason, but he coerced her into doing so. That was the only plausible explanation. Authorities believe that Dalene told Jason that she would report it to the police, so he put her in his car, drove many miles past her home, and then turned into a field where he killed her. However, the body's extreme decomposition made it impossible to verify that theory. Jason Gilley was found guilty of Dalene's murder in November 2013 and given a life sentence without the possibility of release. He made an unsuccessful attempt to appeal the sentence. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Horia and Bouvier, both foreign students, became friends while attending the Sorbonne in Paris. The girls studied the history, social and political movements and culture of the region because they were fervent about foreign cultures, particularly those of Latin America. Horia was 24 years old and was born in Morocco. She chose to set aside her books and travel to Argentina after finishing her thesis on the subject. At 29, Cassandra was accustomed to seeing the world, so she accepted her friend's invitation with pleasure. After packing their bags, the girls set out on a journey across the Caribbean basin, Central America, and South America. The friends traveled to Salta, a province in northwest Argentina with a fascinating history, geography, and social scene, in July 2011. The terrain varies from tropically dry plains in the east to snow-capped peaks in the west. Curiosity-driven students can explore and study the architecture, which includes churches and cathedrals constructed during the colonial era. It is important to note, though, that Salta upholds conservative traditions, much like many northern provinces in the nation, and most likely throughout Latin America. The distinctions between social classes are noticeable, and the Catholic Church has a big impact on people's daily lives. A small number of powerful families have dominated politics for many years. It should be noted that the details will become clearer as this story develops. Since they intended to return to Buenos Aires, Cassandra and Horia checked into a hotel in Salta on July 15 and left to explore the sites without unpacking. A popular tourist destination, Salta is renowned for its low crime rate and welcoming locals, particularly to visitors. The natural reserve known as Quebrada de San Lorenzo is Salta's main draw. The girls bought tickets to the reserve at precisely 4:23 p.m. on July 15. Instead of hiring a guide, they went far into the forest. They were expected to get in touch with their families from Buenos Aires and let them know which city they would be visiting next, but there was no word from them. Unable to handle the uncertainty, their families contacted Cassandra and Horia's Argentinian acquaintances on the 19th and requested that they call the police. 2 weeks later, a group of visitors from a nearby town followed the French girl's path. Although it was not uncommon in this region, they reached the reserve rather late in the evening. One of the tourists broke away from the others at around 6 p.m. in order to locate a private area in the thickets. He saw what appeared to be a body there. He screamed and hurried back to the group to tell them about his discovery, after approaching and verifying that it was, in fact, a body. Around 10 p.m., the police showed up at the reserve. The tourists had only noted that the body was close to a viewpoint. They had not marked the precise spot where they discovered it. As a result, the police first had trouble finding it in the dark and among the thickets. The body was eventually located, but before they could start their work, they found 2 more victims a short distance away. It was the 2 French tourists who had gone missing. Given that many people in the area hunt for food, the police came up with a number of theories, one of which was that the girls might have been unintentionally shot by a local hunter. Thus, locals were the target of the search. Francisco Tojeder, a tourist guide for horseback riding, was taken into custody by the police. But since there was no proof linking him to the crime, he was freed a few days later. The police needed a scapegoat to placate the public, so his wife told the media that her husband was arrested only because they were impoverished. The police told the media right away after the bodies were found that they had been lying in the forest for roughly 3 days. There were several theories as to what might have happened to the girls during the remaining days when they were reported missing, because they had retained their tickets to the reserve for the 15th. There was conjecture that they were abducted, held captive, and subsequently disposed of. The police later explained that the girls had been lying in the reserve close to the viewpoint for 14 days before they were killed. There were rumors of violence against the girls because of Cassandra's ripped clothes, and Horia's pants and underwear being pulled down to her knees. This was verified by the autopsy. The tourists were sexually assaulted, severely beaten, and then shot with a .22 caliber gun. The police discovered a matching shell casing in the reserve. They went back to the reserve's entrance after determining that the girls had successfully gone for a walk. There weren't many people there because it was getting late, and the weather wasn't suitable for strolls. The perpetrator or perpetrators obviously approached their victims at that point, and one of them assaulted Cassandra. The girl was kneeling in front of her killer when she was shot in the head, following the abuse she had endured. After witnessing Cassandra's murder, Horia made the decision to persevere. She struggled with at least one attacker, as evidenced by the clump of hair that remained in her clenched fist. Then, based on the investigators' assumptions, the girl was shot and ran down the slope from the height. It went through her shoulder and struck her in the back. The criminals departed, thinking Horia was done as well. She tried to crawl back to the trail, but she was still alive. Her efforts were in vain, however, for she was too feeble and suffered for several more hours before passing away from blood loss. When the investigators looked through the girl's hotel room, they discovered that there was only one phone among their possessions, rather than the two they had anticipated. They found that a local girl named Maria Fernanda Canyons, RS, the daughter of a former police officer, was using Horia's phone after tracking it down. They also discovered that Horia was in possession of her camera. According to the girl, these were presents from Gustavo Lassi, her boyfriend. The 23-year-old Gustavo was a guide in the reserve, and his father was a tourist ticket vendor. Gustavo had offered the French girls his services, but they turned him down. Gustavo thought that changing the SIM card in the phone would be sufficient to evade detection. Gustavo Lassi admitted to being at the crime scene and taking part in the violence, though not right away. He asserted, however, that he was only a witness and neither the murderer nor the instigator of the French girls. He described how, after hearing a commotion and rushing to the cries, he saw two men, a stonemason named Daniel Vilt, 24, and a gardener from the plains of San Lorenzo named Santos Clemente Vera, 31, tormenting the girls. These men allegedly forced him to take part in the violence before letting him go. He did, however, remember to bring the girl's camera and phone. The gun that fired the deadly shots was found by the police during a search of Gustavo's house. The police were able to determine the precise moment of the attack on the French girls thanks to Horia's camera. Before starting their hike through the reserve, the girls took a few pictures while they were sightseeing. The tourists' final photograph, taken at 6:28 p.m., 2 hours and 5 minutes later, was hazy and ambiguous, leading investigators to surmise that the attack happened at that exact moment. Murder charges were brought against all three men. Witnesses came forward right away and identified Vilt as the individual who tried to sell a rifle. But since he was at a bank when the attack happened and could provide proof, he had a strong alibi. Vera was freed because of insufficient evidence and his denial of guilt, while Gustavo Lassi was sentenced to 30 years in prison in 2014. He said he had an alibi too. Both men were given life sentences in prison in 2016, though, after the prosecutor insisted on a review of the case. One of the most well-known cases in Argentine history appeared to have come to an end. The story doesn't stop there, though. The case was investigated by French journalist Jean-Charles Chattard, who spent 4 years writing a book outlining his reasons why the girls could not have been killed on July 15 in the nature reserve, as the investigators claim. The journalist is certain that the girls' bodies were just taken to the reserve following the murder, not that they perished there. First of all, in contrast to the victim's shoes, his were covered in dust and dirt even after a brief stroll through the reserve. Such a path, enduring violence, fighting for their lives, and still having clean shoes would have been impossible for the girls. Second, the tourists' overall appearance was peculiar. They weren't dressed for a hike in the nature reserve, but rather for an evening event in the city. The bodies were left in Quebrada de San Lorenzo for 2 weeks, which is the next oddity. The reserve is an open, wild place where condors, foxes, and pumas live. The police might have discovered fully gnawed bones after such a time. Despite the fact that the bodies were found in a well-known reserve close to a popular viewpoint, they were found to be spotless. Last but not least, the pathologist who examined the bodies declared with confidence that they were killed no more than 3 to 5 days prior to the autopsy. The doctor was categorical when it came to the date of the murders, stating in the report that it was July 26, 2011. Interestingly, this date was rescheduled for July 15 by the investigating judge. Is there any chance that the judge purposefully falsified the facts in order to shield someone? Was he attempting to falsify the evidence? The commissioner in charge of the investigation, Nestor Piccolo, was persuaded of this very thing, and it might have cost him his life. 4 months after the investigation began, Commissioner Piccolo passed away, inexplicably. He was discovered with a bullet wound to his head at the commissioner's office entrance. Although his mother claimed that her son made the decision, she is positive that he was executed. Nestor was developing a new version prior to his passing, and no signs of gunpowder were discovered on his hands. Clemente Vera claims that Gustavo Lossi is merely an accomplice of the true criminals, who are representatives of the province's upper classes, and that he is innocent. Many people, including the judge and powerful local families, were concerned about Nestor's investigation because they did not want the truth to be revealed and could not permit the deaths of the French girls to come to light. But in April 2014, an anonymous letter detailing the same trail that Commissioner Piccolo was looking into broke this conspiracy of silence. The families of the victims in France received the letter. After obtaining a copy, Chittard followed up on this lead. A woman who was afraid to testify in court wrote the anonymous letter by hand but did not sign it. After several months, Chittard was able to locate the witness. It turned out to be a girl who frequently hangs out with a select group of powerful people in Salta. She was aware that since the two tourists had been invited to a party hosted by the city's affluent youth on July 15, 2011, they could not have been murdered in the nature reserve. Her account of what transpired is entirely different. Alcohol is served freely at these parties, and everything seems like it's from a movie. But it's all real. The girl claimed that Cassandra and Horia were among the visitors, and that they were spotted close to the pool. The men's interest in the gorgeous French women grew as the evening went on, and more alcohol was consumed. They led them inside the house at around 3 in the morning, and nobody saw them again. One of the tourists was being harassed by the guys. She refused, of course, but things went too far and the men no longer cared about her opinion. In order to keep the truth from coming to light, the guys chose to murder both of them after her friends saw what transpired. They took their time, though, torturing the victims for days before killing them. The witness gave the precise address of the alleged incident, a villa in Buena Vista, the city's most upscale neighborhood where ministers, deputies, and affluent foreigners live. Since the villa is frequently rented out to private parties, it is typically not occupied permanently. Additionally, the French women were last spotted in a pool. The villa's location, directly beneath the bodies, is the most fascinating aspect, though. A secret trail leads to the nature reserve's lookout point behind the house. If the witness's account is accurate, the girls' bodies were transported through that path during the night and dumped in the thickets of the reserve. But how could such a crazy situation that was taking place in full view at a party be kept a secret for so long? According to the witness, it can be explained by the fear that actual criminals instill in anyone who has the audacity to speak up. She claimed that the son of a deputy who assaulted the French woman was responsible for organizing the party. He severely beat her when she attempted to flee. The politician's 2 other sons also participated in the attack and subsequent killing. Today, during his most recent election campaign, the deputy's face calmly gazes down from a number of billboards. It should be noted that one of his sons became a politician, just like his father. One judge who oversaw the initial investigation expressed a great deal of interest in the story told in the anonymous letter, but the politician declined to comment on these claims. He thinks it has everything needed to bring about justice. The judge who later took over the case, however, had no plans to look for additional offenders. He blames the deaths of the French women on the provincial justice system and thinks that the family must have a lot of power to influence the police. The witness's account that he witnessed the 2 French women departing the nature reserve on July 15 is given more credence in the updated version. This implies that the crime might have taken place at a different time and location than the investigators maintain. Regarding the hazy photos purportedly taken during the assault in the nature reserve, Cassandra's father, Jean-Michel Bouvier, sent them to a specialist who thinks they were altered with a photo editing application. The lighting and shot angle are not as accurate as the picture shows. The families of the victims in France no longer hold the legal system to any standards. Jean-Michel Bouvier examined his daughter's body and performed his own independent DNA analysis. The most private areas were found to contain the DNA of Gustavo Lossi, 2 other men, and 1 woman. The sample from Clemente Vera was nowhere to be found. Uncertainty surrounding the ownership of the remaining samples raises concerns about Gustavo Lossi's actual involvement in the attack on the girls, as well as the identities of the other participants. Meanwhile, Clemente Vera's parents' modest house still stands in the center of San Lorenzo, just a few hundred meters from the location where Cassandra and Horia's bodies were discovered. They struggle to make ends meet after their son's arrest, because they are too old to work the land or take care of the animals. Many locals, including Clemente's wife and parents, maintain his innocence. They think his only fault is that he didn't have the money to hire lawyers and lived close to the crime scene. The fact that there is no evidence linking him to the crime in the case files makes it all the more tragic. According to him, the police demanded a confession to the murder, beat him, and threatened him and his child. They searched his home for any incriminating evidence after he refused to comply, but they were unable to find any. Regarding this, Santos Clemente Vera complained to the Supreme Court of Argentina in 2017 and was given permission for a case review in June 2020. He hopes that a new trial will be held and that he will be found not guilty. It's interesting that Cassandra's father believes he is innocent. After conducting his own investigation, attending all of the hearings and visiting Argentina several times to learn more about the case, he came to the conclusion that Vera was not guilty of the crime. As a result, he apologized to Vera while he was incarcerated and launched a social media campaign to secure his release. Bouvier worries that while an innocent person is still incarcerated, the case review process is taking an unreasonably long time. On November 25, 2013, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women, a monument honoring Cassandra and Horia was formally unveiled in Salta. In response to Jean-Michel Bouvier's request to take on this piece, Salta-born sculptor Alfredo Garzon, who lived in Paris, created a face with an agonized expression, eyes, and an outstretched hand. Alfredo was able to capture the anguish, terror, and suffering that the girls endured in a very potent image. The bodies of the victims were discovered in the San Lorenzo ravine, where the sculpture is situated. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. As they did almost every day of that year, Serena Tolson and her friend Israel spent the evening of January 23, 2012. The young couple was unaware of the descent of the dark night. They heard a scream while they were seated at a picnic table in the neighborhood park. Since it was 2:30 in the morning, it couldn't have been children playing. Israel and Serena ran toward the source of the shrill scream when it recurred. The scene that played out in front of them looked like the bloodiest horror film ever. A man was hovering over a girl in the middle of the road, repeatedly stabbing her with a knife. Serena yelled for the man to stop as she ran toward him. Israel shoved the assailant away from the girl, but the man got up and fled back to his car as Serena was calling the emergency hotline. With a bigger knife in his hands, he moved away from it. The two were pursued by the man. Israel and Serena dispersed in different directions, but when Serena turned around, she saw that he was going back to his victim to complete the task he had begun, not chasing after her. Serena was unable to speak because of the noise the big knife made as it entered the victim's body, and the girl saw him thrust it into her. The girl was dead, she told the operator. In the meantime, the man went to his vehicle, climbed in, and drove off. Melissa Dahm was born in the well-known resort city of Clearwater, Florida, which is renowned for its immaculate white beaches. Being the youngest in her family, Melissa was surrounded by her parents' and older siblings' love as she grew up. She never had any issues. She wanted to make her parents proud, so she did well in school. In an effort to become independent and self-sufficient, she secured a job at Dairy Curl to cover her own gas, insurance, and other costs. Before going to the beach to purchase ice cream, everyone would stop at Dairy Curl due to the cafe's proximity to her home and the frequent visits from her friends. Melissa loved her job there. Melissa first became aware of Robert Burton at Dairy Curl. Although he was a few years older than Melissa, they went to the same school. Robert's amiable and charming demeanor enthralled the girl. He was tender and kind. The young couple wanted to spend more and more time together, even though they seemed to be very different from one another. Robert didn't particularly enjoy getting together with friends, but Melissa was gregarious and energetic and loved spending time with them. In addition, Robert felt uneasy around his own family, whereas Melissa grew up in a close-knit household. He felt alienated in his own home because his mother had remarried and he had stepbrothers. He consequently began spending more time with Melissa's relatives. When Melissa discovered that Robert had not given up smoking as he had promised, it was the first red flag in their relationship. Although he expressed regret and pledged to stop lying to her, Melissa felt uneasy about being duped for such a long time. Their tension only grew after Robert persuaded her to abandon her aspirations of enrolling in a prominent university where she had been accepted. Melissa told everyone that she didn't want to leave the town, but in actuality, Robert was the main reason. Robert spent all of his time with her, which interfered with her work when she was able to secure a part-time job at the hospital. While still holding on to her dream of becoming a nurse like her mother, he would set up scenes, making her the guilty party and persuading her that she was the reason behind their frequent arguments, even if she attempted to tactfully explain that her shift had only just started. Melissa, who was practically a teenager, didn't realize that Robert's actions were out of the ordinary and thought that was the case in all relationships. Melissa received an invitation from her sister to hang out on the beach with friends in the spring of 2011. Melissa's ex-boyfriend was brought up by one of the guys, which obviously upset Robert. He began acting like a child and stepping on her shoes from behind as they were making their way back to the parking lot. Despite knowing she wasn't at fault, the young man obviously wanted to get even with her. Melissa tried to escape him by running ahead of him, knowing he wouldn't stop. She turned around when she came to a small hill and yelled at him to stop acting like such a child, but he pushed her off the elevation without a word. The girl suffered severe scratches after falling down the hill. Her friends hurried to her aid when she cried out, but Robert went to the others and said Melissa had fallen, rather than running to her. Robert called Melissa a liar after she claimed he had shoved her. If Melissa's older sister hadn't stepped in and taken her home, it's unclear how the argument would have ended. The young couple shouldn't be left alone, in her opinion. Melissa's mother insisted that her daughter end the relationship with him after hearing about the incident, and the girl appeared to comply. But 2 weeks later, to her astonishment, Robert returned to her home. Their relationship completely changed as a result of this incident. He threatened to harm himself, which prevented Melissa from ending their relationship. Melissa and Robert were once more hanging out with friends on October 25, 2011. Melissa apparently felt more courageous than normal because she refused to go get cigarettes when Robert insisted on it. Clearly upset, the young man grabbed her car keys and demanded that they go to the gas station store together. Melissa subtly requested that the guys follow them in their cars since she could sense a storm coming. After noticing this tactic, Robert began to wonder if Melissa had spoken to them. Naturally, she denied it, but he was unable to relax. He began flinging Melissa's phone, keys, and bag across the street after they got home and she braked in the driveway. He hit the girl in the face after she screamed for him to stop. Melissa was clearly trying to beat Robert when he lunged at her, but she was able to hit him in the groin, get up, and flee. The girl recalled where her phone had been thrown by him. Reaching for it, she dialed 911, but she hesitated when it came time to hit the call button. Robert always threatened to kill her if she ever complained about him to anyone, after all. However, he was only 2 steps behind her when she turned around. She gained courage from that. She called the number and informed the emergency operator about the attack. She realized he wasn't pursuing her as she ran toward the intersection where the gas station was. She had the sudden thought that he was aware of the location of the keys he had thrown. As he always threatened, he would visit her home and murder her mother. It was Robert's primary means of controlling Melissa, because he was aware of how important her mother was to her. Melissa hurried back, terrified for her mother. Robert grabbed her as he leaped out from behind the bushes. He most likely would have given her a serious beating, but just then a patrol car arrived. Melissa couldn't believe he was holding her responsible for what had happened, so he yelled at her angrily, "So you really want to do this to me? You want me to get arrested?" The girl, still under Robert's influence, started pleading that instead of being arrested, he be sent to anger management classes or something. Regardless of what she said, the officers informed her that everyone had seen the incident and that he would be arrested. After escorting her home, the police officers spoke with her and her mother about domestic violence, explaining that victims frequently went back to their abusers and that they didn't want her to experience the same thing. After being taken into custody, Robert was accused of assault. But only 6 hours into his incarceration, He called Melissa the very next morning and insisted that she take him home. Luckily, she declined. January 23, 2012 was the date set for Robert's trial. Melissa had a good weekend with her friends because she didn't have to be at the trial. She was getting ready for her impending tests and gradually getting back to her regular life. However, the phone rang in the middle of the night while she was soundly asleep. Robert was the one. He called again, but Melissa didn't answer. Reluctantly, she replied. Robert informed her that he was close to her residence. He begged for a final farewell meeting while in tears, saying that he just wanted to give her one last hug and that they shouldn't part on such a sour note. The girl reluctantly consented and, believing she could manage the situation, retrieved her phone, keys, and pepper spray, but she knew it was a big mistake the moment she stepped outside. Unfortunately, the girl was too ashamed to turn around because Robert had already noticed her. She hoped to bid him farewell as soon as possible and then go back to bed to rest before her test. The young man came up to her and gave her a tight hug, and then she heard a click. He pulled out his pocket knife. With great force, he hit her, striking her throat, face, and shoulders. Melissa let out a cry and struggled for her life. Suddenly, a girl came out of the shadows and told him to stop. Melissa reached for the girl's hand even though she didn't know her and wasn't sure how she could help. She hoped to call for assistance when she noticed a phone in her hands. Israel complied with Serena's instruction to push the assailant away from the girl at the same moment because that was her name. Robert got up and walked calmly to his car. Robert abruptly started chasing after them as Serena went up to Melissa and was ready to take her hand. Fearing she would be his second victim, the girl was frightened. She reported the attack to 911 while she was running. However, she turned around to see that the man had gone back to finish what he had begun with the bloodied girl on the ground. The girl was dead, Serena was sure. In actuality, Melissa was still conscious, but she was certain that everything would end when Robert ran her over with his car. That evening, Clearwater police officer Melissa Harris was working on paperwork in her patrol car when a radio call regarding a crime was received. She was told that the man who had attacked the girl had driven off in a red pickup truck and that a dead girl was lying on the side of the road on the north side of the park, but there was nobody there when she got there. Unable to comprehend what was going on, she slowly looked around the park. Melissa was certain Robert was aware that assistance was on the way and that everything needed to be completed as soon as possible. In order to prevent him from running her over with his car, she crawled and did everything she could to get off the road. Her neighbor's mailbox was close to two sizable cement piles. She knew that the cement and the mailbox would keep her safe if she could crawl there. She even succeeded in getting to her feet at one point. The weary girl reached the mailbox, collapsed in the dirt, and heard his car just pull away. It grew very quiet, slowly. Melissa thought she was going to die. When she was illuminated by a police car's spotlight, she prayed for sin forgiveness. Officer Melissa Harris acknowledges that she had never witnessed anything like it in her years of police work. The victim had numerous wounds, many of which were still heavily bleeding, and her teeth had been knocked out. However, she was able to provide Melissa with Robert's name, address, birth date, and car make in addition to Melissa's own name. To dispel any uncertainty regarding the identity of the offender, she even spelled out his last name. The girl whispered that she could now go after giving all the information. But the oncoming medics stopped her from closing her eyes because they knew she might not wake up again if she did. Melissa's mother woke up as they struggled to treat her most serious injuries. The woman was asked to accompany the police officer, who had already arrived at their house after the girl had been attacked, because her daughter had also been attacked. She was positive that Melissa was sleeping upstairs because the police had misidentified the door. She realized, however, that the officer was pressing her along in order to get her to see Melissa before it was too late. Every second that went by made Melissa's condition worse. She was clearly in need of helicopter transportation. Cameron, a firefighter who also showed up on the scene, recommended landing on the football field. He marked the landing area with signal cones after jumping over the fence. Melissa was placed on a stretcher in a matter of minutes. Nobody thought she would live, and her condition was critical. Cameron, however, felt somehow certain that he would see her again as he watched the helicopter take off. Melissa came dangerously close to death multiple times on the operating table. Her body just didn't have enough blood, and her heart had a hard time pumping it. As a result, While transfusing blood on one hand, the doctors attempted to halt the bleeding on the other. 3 hours later, she was still breathing and squeezing the surgeon's hand feebly. It was only at that point that the weary medical staff decided to take a break and let the patient and themselves rest. The police radio announced that Robert had been spotted in the city in the morning. Presumably to wash away Melissa's blood, he made a stop at a store and purchased a large amount of water. He then went to Walmart to buy sleeping pills and had a meal at McDonald's. His vehicle was then discovered wrecked in a store. The young man was discovered unconscious behind the wheel. The vehicle caught fire after the wheel carved a hole in the ground from the prolonged operation. After being brought to the hospital, the man was shocked to learn that his victim had lived. At first, Robert maintained his innocence by saying he wasn't himself. He suddenly admitted his guilt, though, after the psychiatric evaluation determined that he was not insane and the court date was set. He received a life sentence without the chance of release. Melissa was hospitalized for 3 weeks. She had to retrain herself to walk, talk, eat, and even close her eyes. Melissa was asked to speak at a violence victim center after she recovered completely. Even though she was extremely anxious, she couldn't help but notice that 2 young firefighters were sitting in the front row, paying close attention to her every move. As it happened, Chief Cameron had called to let them know Melissa would be speaking close by and suggested they surprise her. The fact that Melissa was the same girl he had assisted in rescuing in the helicopter astounded Cameron. After introducing himself, Cameron invited Melissa and her mother to their fire station for a celebratory lunch. The youths were essentially inseparable after that day. Cameron restored Melissa's love for life, even though she was certain she would never date again. Later, when she was asked to ceremoniously open a baseball game, Cameron ran up to her and asked, "Will you marry me?" Melissa naturally said yes, and the two fell in love and were married in 2017. Never date an ex-partner after a relationship breakup is Melissa's main piece of advice as a lawyer who advocates for the rights of victims of violence. Even she was unaware of the potential danger. She believes she lived to fulfill the vital duty of assisting young women who feel they are undeserving of respect and true love, despite having nearly died. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. This is the story of a murderer who avoided punishment for years, despite numerous facts pointing to his involvement in a small town. A 13-year-old girl vanished, and it was not discovered until 24 hours later. This case remained unsolved for over 10 years, and it was finally resolved in the summer of 2021. In this video, we'll explain what happened to Haley Dunn. This story was set in the American town of Colorado City, Texas. This location is typical of low-rise America, covering 14 square kilometers. On Christmas Day 2010, the town had a New Year's vibe. Haley Dunn, a 13-year-old girl living with her mother Billy, boyfriend Sean, and older brother David, had a happy Christmas. Her mother divorced her father, Clint, when she was 10 years old, but they never stopped communicating. Her father lived across the street from Haley's house. On December 26th, the girl spent the majority of Christmas at her father's house, unwrapping presents before returning home to play video games and go to bed. The following day, her stepfather and mother went to work as usual. Billy left her cell phone at home so that the kids could reach her. Before leaving, she peeked into her daughter's room while she was still sleeping. Sean worked in another town, about a half-hour drive away. According to him, he had an argument with his boss that day, which led to him being fired and leaving work only 10 minutes after arriving. He then drove to his mother's house, where he spent some time before returning to Colorado City around 3 p.m. Sean went to pick up Billy from work that evening. When they arrived home, Billy noticed that her daughter was not there. Sean informed her that the girl had gone to her father's house and planned to spend the night at a friend's house. Haley frequently stayed overnight at friends' houses, so her mother took this information calmly. Small towns like this often have the illusion of safety, so parents are less worried about their child's safety. On December 28th, Haley did not return home. She went door to door, but no one saw the girl that day. Billy went to the police around 2 p.m., but they chose the easiest route. The police's main theory was that she had fled from home, which initially hampered the investigation. A voluntary escape is not investigated to the same extent as a missing minor. They searched Billy and Clint's houses and brought search dogs to the scene. The next day, they followed Haley's trail from the house to a nearby motel. It was extremely strange. None of the motel employees had seen this girl. She was not captured on any security cameras, and a thorough search of the premises yielded no results. Trained dogs pointed to a motel, but the girl apparently never arrived. As word of Haley's disappearance spread throughout the city, dozens of concerned citizens joined the search. Some looked around the area, while others printed and distributed flyers. And now we come to another strange moment. Clint, the girl's father, almost never left the street. He looked in every corner, nook and cranny, including dumpsters. He said he couldn't sit at home and wait. Meanwhile, Billy and Sean were less enthusiastic. The mother distributed flyers but refused to go around the neighborhood looking for her daughter. She stated that searching gave her the impression that they were already looking for her body, and that there was no hope of finding the girl alive. Sean didn't participate at all, which isn't the strangest thing. Billy and Sean hosted a New Year's Eve party on December 31st, 4 days after the girl had gone missing. They had friends over to listen to music, drink, and party. Without a trace seemed completely absurd. On January 3rd, a week after Haley vanished, the police officially declared her missing. This meant that more serious agencies, such as the FBI and the Texas Rangers, could become involved, and representatives from both arrived in Colorado City and began their investigation. Volunteers continued to search the area, and over 100 billboards about the missing girl were posted across Texas and beyond. Detectives completely ruled out the possibility of an escape. For one reason, they couldn't figure out why Haley would choose to take such a step. The day before her disappearance, she had been in a good mood, and for the rest of the time, the girl showed no signs of a desire to flee. Second, all of her belongings were left in the room. If the girl had decided to flee, she would have taken something with her. The detectives quickly realized they needed to look closer at Billy and Sean. Their passive response to the girl's search and the New Year's Eve party made one wonder if they cared about Haley. The detectives discovered that on December 27th, the same day Haley allegedly spent the night at a friend's house, Sean and Billy drew $140 from their bank cards. They admitted that the money was used to buy illegal substances, which the couple consumed that evening while their children were away. Billy failed on 2 attempts. During the first interrogation, she was under the influence of drugs, and the second result revealed she was lying. Sean failed 2 interrogations and walked away before answering the third. Billy suspected Sean was involved in her daughter's disappearance and demanded that he leave her home. On January 12th, police officially announced that Sean was being treated as a suspect. Several factors contributed to this conclusion, including the couple's strained relationship. The police examined Sean's phone's geolocation data and discovered that his account of the day Haley disappeared did not match reality. He did arrive at work and stayed for 10 minutes before returning to Colorado City to Billy's house. It wasn't until later that he drove to his mother's house. It's worth noting that the police tracked the phone's location. The girl repeatedly mentioned being afraid of Sean. Haley told her best friend that she preferred to spend time outside or at friends' houses because she didn't feel safe with Sean. She once told her grandmother that she often saw Sean standing in front of her bedroom door in the middle of the night, and she was afraid he would come in. The police soon became aware of a conversation with Haley's uncle about the girl's disappearance. Her uncle said roughly the following: "I can't believe anyone would harm a child." Sean's response was extremely unusual. He compared it to killing a deer with all of this information in hand. The detectives concluded that Haley did not come from a wealthy family. Her mother and stepfather frequently drank and used illegal drugs, and Sean's behavior at parties appeared suspicious, but there was no direct evidence against him. Finally, the police contacted Child Welfare, who decided to remove Haley's older brother. On February 24th, police searched Sean and Billy's home, as well as his mother's. A massive discovery awaited them. They discovered over 100,000 obscene images of minors on a removable drive and a hard drive. The police also seized his laptop, but did not appear to have time to examine its contents. Sean's father arrived at the station and demanded his son's equipment back. It's unclear why the police did, but that's not the most interesting part. Sean received no punishment for having so much illegal content on his computer. On March 17th, police officers visited Billy's house to question Sean. A woman opened the door and said he wasn't home, but the officer showed her a pre-arranged warrant and entered the house, discovering Sean hiding there for concealing a suspect. Billy received 90 days in jail and a year in corrections. She was transferred to a Travis County Correctional Facility. Following her release, she remained in the area with Sean in 2012, however. The couple eventually split. Billy suspected Sean was involved in her daughter's disappearance, but the case had stalled due to a lack of new evidence and volunteers' inability to identify the girl. On March 16, 2013, a hiker discovered human remains near Lake J.B. Thomas in Scary County. Experts conducted tests and determined that the remains belonged to Haley Dunn, whose body was approximately 20 miles away from her home. However, they had circumstantial evidence that the girl's body had been discovered only a few miles from Sean's mother's house, which matched the geolocation data on his phone as determined by the towers. Given the short distance, Sean could have easily left the body in that location without anyone knowing. Furthermore, he grew up in the area and was well versed in where to hide the body, but investigators were unable to uncover any additional clues, and the case was refrozen for several years. Despite this, the girl's family had to wait 4 years to bury her body. A memorial service was held in January 2017. In 2018, Haley's father, Clint, stated that he believed Sean and Billy were guilty and his version, his mother, either helped conceal the truth or was directly involved in the murder. During the same year, he began conducting numerous interviews and attempted to actively publicize the case. The man stated that in the early years of the investigation, he tried not to bother the police with constant questions, but his patience had run out. The detectives did little to investigate, and his last hope was to spread the word widely in an attempt to bring the perpetrators to justice, which paid off. In 2019, an unknown person wrote to Clint, informing him that in 2011, he discovered several items that could have belonged to Haley. This person was in high school at the time and had not heard about the missing girl, so he did not consider reporting his find to the police. True information about the items has yet to be revealed, and the police have not stated what they are. Clint only mentioned that they were discovered in an area that had been thoroughly searched by volunteers and police. Later, new information emerged. Private investigator Erica Moore, who was handling the Haley case and kept in touch with Clint, revealed some disturbing information about Sean. In October 2019, she began receiving messages from various women in Texas, all of whom claimed they were being aggressively harassed online by a man named Casey. Not only was he harassing them with lewd messages, but he was also sending them explicit photos and videos of himself, as Sean shared a middle name. Erica asked the women to send her photos and videos of the man sending the girls, and her theory was confirmed to be correct. She persuaded one woman to go to the police station and report Sean, but they refused to press charges and even accused her of falsifying the facts. Erica believed Sean was responsible for Haley's death and planned to arrest him for stalking women on the internet. However, the case remained quiet until May 2021 when Erica and Clint were summoned to the district attorney's office for an urgent meeting. Police arrested Sean and charged him with Haley's murder. He is currently in Vail, awaiting trial on $20 million bail, but police have yet to reveal what new evidence led them to make this arrest. Apparently, this information will be kept secret until the trial. All we know now is that the police were granted permission to collect Sean's DNA sample shortly before his arrest. There may be a connection here to Haley's belongings, which were discovered in 2011. When Billy learned of her ex-boyfriend's arrest, she made a strange statement. She said she wasn't surprised Sean was involved in the murder, and she wanted to believe in his innocence until the very end. She also thanked God that the man would now be punished for his actions, which Billy had actively obstructed during the initial investigation while defending Sean. A date for the trial will be announced soon. At this point, it is difficult to predict whether a conviction will be obtained. It will be determined solely by the significance of the evidence, which police are now withholding in any case. Sean remained at large for over 10 years, despite the fact that all evidence pointed to his involvement in the murder. Haley's complaints to friends and relatives, the use of forbidden materials with children, and the man's constant lies during interrogations raised suspicions on all sides, as did Billy. She initially expressed no desire for justice for her daughter, Clint, but, unlike her, He worked hard and got his way. In one interview, Erica Moore hinted that the case would not have been solved without his participation. She did not provide any details, but we can recall the story of Haley's found objects. The person who discovered them only learned about the entire story through Clint's social media posts. More information about this case, including a court decision, will undoubtedly be released in the near future. Right now, all indications are that Sean will be convicted, and in Texas, that means only one thing: he will face the death penalty for his actions against the child. Unfortunately, there is no way this will help Haley Dunn live a long and happy life anymore. Please share your thoughts on this story in the comments section, and thank you for watching. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Little Bria had only ever been frightened by imaginary monsters. She called her mother, Michelle, on November 20, 2000, claiming to have seen someone outside the window. The day before, 3 armed men wearing masks broke into her house. Michelle looked out and saw no one, so she dismissed her daughter's words as the product of her young imagination. The difference with this incident, though, was that Bria saw them. They had looked through the window. Michelle and Bria were being held at gunpoint in their own home's living room by the same individuals who had been there the previous evening. In a peaceful San Diego, California suburb, it was November 2009. Michelle Renee was 35 years old and had just returned home from her job as a manager at the bank. She and her 7-year-old daughter, Bria, resided in a rather remote home. Michelle had been a bank manager for more than 13 years, putting in a lot of time and effort to advance through the ranks and land a job where she was respected and trusted. She was happy to be home with Bria after a long day. The two of them were playing Game Boy on the couch when a loud noise suddenly burst from somewhere behind them. Michelle saw 3 people when she turned around. As though they were a takeover squad, they stormed into the house. This was obviously not a SWAT team, though. The strangers wore all black clothing and were armed. Bria and Michelle screamed. When Michelle was grabbed by her hair, a gun aimed at her face and flung to the floor close to the couch, she was able to see her daughter running into another room. After securing her with duct tape, they turned the woman to face her daughter, who was lying face down close to the door with her hands and legs bound. "Are you going to kill Mommy?" Bria asked. "Do you intend to murder me?" The stranger said, "No, if the mother does everything we tell her to Michelle's belief that they had broken in to kill them. Michelle was told bluntly by the illegal intruders, "You will rob the bank for us, or we will kill you, and your daughter will be first." The intruders told Michelle that they had been watching her for months and had a plan because they knew she was a bank manager. They would stay with her all night to give her instructions and make sure she understood exactly what she was supposed to do. As they held her and her daughter bound on the couch with tape, the gang leader gave her explicit instructions throughout the night, stressing what she needed to do repeatedly. He told Michelle that 6 more gang members were standing guard outside, waiting to murder her if she did anything stupid. Around 11, a female voice on the radio caught his attention, as if to reaffirm what he had just said. He was told by the accomplice that a car had pulled into the driveway. The neighbor of Michelle and Bria had shown up. She lived in the same building and was named Kimbra. She was obviously very drunk after returning from a night out. She shocked the criminals by resisting their attempts to grab her. One of the criminals shouted at Kimbra not to move while pointing the weapon straight at his face. In an attempt to shield her friend, Michelle pushed his arm away, but he pointed the gun at her and hissed at her to never touch him again. Kimbra was finally restrained, and they all waited for dawn. Michelle became aware that she might be spending her final evening with her daughter. She needed to share everything with Bria. Thinking that this might be the last time she would ever touch her daughter's hair or see her sleeping, the mother smoothed her hair to give her some space to rest. The nightmare persisted in the morning. The robbers' leader told her to get up and prepare for work at 6 o'clock. He interrupted her to apply dynamite to her as she was getting dressed and arranging her hair. She was in excruciating pain as he taped it firmly to her back. Kimbra and Bria were also outfitted with sets of explosives by the criminals. The girl sobbed and asked what it was, but the mother merely muttered something because she didn't want her to become even more terrified. Then they showed Michelle something that looked like a lock on a door. According to the man, it was a detonator, and he would press the button if she made even the slightest mistake. The detonator had a 10-meter radius, he added. Bria was placed in her bedroom closet by the criminals. The mother reiterated that everything would be all right and that she would be back shortly. "Mom, have courage," her daughter said. Two men remained inside the house as Michelle left, and the gang leader gave her a suitcase containing a sports bag before hiding in the backseat of her Jeep. As she always did, she was headed to work in a minute, but this time she had a gun pressed against her side and dynamite strapped to her back. She parked in her usual spot when she arrived, and the man told her she had 5 minutes to come out with the money after the cash collector arrived before she got out of the car. He had his finger on the detonator in case something went wrong. Around 9 o'clock, the cash collector showed up and handed over the cash. Michelle was in charge of getting the money because she was a bank manager. Michelle asked her colleague to go with her to the vault as soon as his car pulled away, and she explained the situation. Michelle was left with no choice but to stuff the bag full of cash while her colleague watched in horror as the bank manager did something so unthinkable. Her heart pounded. Was she moving quickly enough? Naturally, Michelle's co-workers informed the police about the incident. But first, she took $360,000 out of the bank. She climbed into the Jeep and got ready to do whatever was asked of her. The criminal told Michelle that she would find her Jeep further down the street and told her to get out of the car after a few blocks. And so, it came to pass. She located her vehicle, got into it, and drove quickly home. The woman didn't know if she would find her daughter alive when she got home. She saw Kimbra's car was gone as soon as she pulled up to the house. She called for Bria as she entered the house, but the silence was uncanny. At last, she heard a small voice. From the other side of the house, Bria was calling to her. Her mother had left the girl in the closet, and she was still there. Relieved, the woman gave her daughter a hug, but it wasn't quite over. Bria saw her mother's expression change to one of panic. The gang leader had departed without taking the dynamite away from her. What if the detonator was used remotely by the criminals? Before departing, Kimbra informed Michelle that they had just cut the tape and thrown the explosives against the far wall, removing the dynamite from the girl and her back. They all rushed to the nearby homes after that. Investigators from the FBI, police, and even a bomb disposal team quickly swarmed the street. The officers soon realized that the dynamite was a fake, consisting only of 2 sticks painted red. However, no one would risk their lives assuming they were fake, given the low lighting and the fact that they were on the victims' backs in such a dire situation. However, Michelle made an effort to commit every detail that might aid in identifying the criminals to memory during the incredibly terrifying 14 hours that she was held captive. It made it possible for her to concentrate on something else rather than the situation's horror. Actually, it was her special talent for picking up on subtleties in people's looks and actions that others might miss. She committed the criminal's physique to memory, attempted to gauge their height from the house's furnishings, took note of their footwear and jeans, and examined the appearance of their weapons. She eventually had to use the restroom, so the gang leader accompanied her. She flipped the switch, brightening the man's face as he led her to the restroom. He was still wearing a mask, of course, but Michelle could see his eyes clearly. They were big, expressive, and a little red at the corner. All of a sudden, she recognized this person from her bank office. She frequently handled new client accounts in her role as bank manager, and on that particular day, a man had visited her office. He clarified that he needed information about opening accounts and making investments because he would shortly inherit a sizable sum. He repeatedly asked the same questions while seated at her desk. The man introduced his companion as Lisa, and they departed when a woman finally came in and said, "Chris, we need to go." However, he gave Michelle his business card before he left. She put it in her desk's top drawer. Michelle's mind was racing with all of these ideas, and she felt that she needed to be extremely careful and not even hint at her recognition of him. Additionally, she recognized his accomplice because she occasionally heard Lisa's voice on the radio. They wouldn't let her die if she messed up. Michelle then requested that the officers immediately check her desk's top drawer. The business card wasn't a fake. It was there. Christopher Butler was the man's name. Butler's conviction as a bank robber was quickly discovered by the FBI. They discovered his residence and placed him under observation. The bank was only a few kilometers from Butler's home and that of his fiancée, Lisa Ramirez. The other 2 men, Robert Ortiz, who had his sights set on Bria, and Christopher Higgins, a big man who protected Michelle, were soon recognized by detectives. The decision to arrest Christopher and Lisa was made on December 1. They were allegedly pulled over for document verification during a routine traffic stop. There was just so much evidence in the car. In a stressful situation, the pneumatic gun in the glove compartment appeared completely real. In addition, the officers discovered a black bag Michelle had described, gloves, homemade masks, Michelle's credit cards, banknote adhesive ribbons, and even a door lock that the criminals had managed to pass off as a detonator. 2 investigators waited for more evidence in the house. Officers discovered a sample of dynamite bearing Christopher and Lisa's fingerprints, along with all the ingredients needed to make fake dynamite. Because they were sure they wouldn't be linked to the crime, the accomplices left a ton of evidence. The $360,000 that was stolen, however, was not discovered by the officers in the house or the car. On that same day, they took $93,000 and arrested Higgins. Higgins admitted to everything and talked about going to Vegas for a few $1,000s. Ortiz fled, but he had $32,000 from the bank when he was apprehended in Wisconsin 3 months later, and he admitted to everything. Christopher Butler, however, denied everything, even in the face of indisputable proof. His fingerprints on the dynamite. Lisa rejected his attempt to place the blame on her. She acknowledged that she was the woman Michelle had heard on the radio. She even acknowledged that she came up with the plan to steal the bank manager using fake dynamite. Lisa disclosed that although they divided the funds into 3 sections, over $100,000 of their portion with Butler was pilfered. To the surprise of all, she said Michelle was part of the plot. Everything had to be confirmed by the police. Michelle acted exactly like a real victim of the crime would have when they recreated the events of that day. Every detail of the victims, Higgins, and Ortiz's accounts lined up, and investigators were unable to uncover any proof linking Michelle to the plot. All 4 suspects were in custody awaiting trial by the spring of 2001. But Michelle and Bria were still processing that terrifying night. The girl thought the criminals would eventually find them and kill them, so she desperately wanted to hide somewhere. She changed from a joyful, fearless, and energetic youngster to a terrified being who feared solitude. Michelle took Bria to stay with her grandmother in Alaska in June because of this. She went back to finish things up and moved to Alaska with her dog, essentially no money and a camera, leaving the child with her grandmother. She drove off on a 9-day journey. Since she had committed to returning for Bria's birthday, she was only on the road for 9 days. Their healing really started only after they relocated. Michelle and Bria were prepared to confront their criminals when they returned to San Diego for the trial a year later. Michelle believed the trial was merely a formality because the investigators had gathered so much evidence. How foolish she was. Together, Christopher and Lisa were put on trial. Lisa would find it challenging to maintain her innocence because she confessed during a videotaped interrogation. In order to spare her from life in prison, her attorney made a deal with prosecutor Tom Manning, but he turned it down. However, the judge was compelled to forbid using Lisa's statements in court because she incriminated Christopher as well as herself during the interrogation. The case depended almost exclusively on Michelle's statements in the absence of Lisa's confession. The attorneys for Christopher and Lisa made the decision to pursue Michelle in an effort to damage her reputation. The jury doesn't think angry witnesses are trustworthy. Michelle did not do well on the witness stand, and they were successful. The problem was that Michelle wasn't your typical victim. She had been a stripper for many years. It was a decision she had to make in order to live, and the woman didn't hide it. Michelle left home when she was 15 years old and put in a lot of effort to rise from bank manager to regional vice president before taking a bank manager position to spend more time with Bria. She kept up her exotic dancing for a while even while she was employed at the bank. However, Michelle's integrity as a witness was called into question by something else. She falsified her resume and other documents, listing experience and skills she didn't have in order to obtain a job at the bank. This appeared to be less than ideal from a legal standpoint. Butler's attorney also probed her personal life in an attempt to paint her as a careless, egotistical mother who would stop at nothing to get money. Her financial troubles might have served as a catalyst for the conspiracy. Since the FBI reports made no reference to Michelle recognizing Lisa's voice on the radio, Lisa's attorney asserted that Michelle had lied about it, and there was nothing stopping him from adamantly declaring that the voice on the radio was not that of his client, because Lisa's admission was not heard in court. He then asked Michelle about marked bills, which are traceable banknotes that banks store in safes in case of a robbery. She didn't intend to endanger her daughter's life, and the criminals cautioned her against taking such notes. However, the attorney now asserted that it was suspicious. In addition, he questioned her maternal instincts, knowing that her daughter is wearing dynamite. Would a mother rush to the house where she is? Following Michelle's 3-day testimony, Christopher took the stand. He testified that he had a romantic relationship with Michelle and that she was behind it all. He had no proof, of course, but his plan was obvious. First and foremost, he was committed to keeping Lisa safe at all costs. Second, compared to kidnapping for robbery, the robbery was deemed less serious. However, his plan only partially succeeded. After 5 days of deliberation, the jury found Christopher guilty of robbery and kidnapping Kimbra and Bria, but they were unsure about Michelle's abduction. 2 jurors abstained, and 1 juror thought Butler was right. He received 3 consecutive life sentences plus an extra 64 years in prison. Lisa was acquitted of all charges. Both Higgins and Ortiz were swiftly convicted in the second trial, which proceeded completely differently. Each received a 32-year sentence. There was never any trace of the remaining $260,000 in bank funds. Therefore, while the guilty were incarcerated to serve their sentences, Bria and Michelle saw it as only the beginning. It was a difficult road for them to heal, but eventually Michelle understood that she could either take charge and set an example and support system for her daughter, or she could become angry and blame the kidnappers for all of her life's shortcomings. So she did. She began her own public relations firm from the beginning, gave numerous speeches in public, told other assault survivors her story, and penned a book that was made into the movie In Captivity. Bria followed her dreams after being inspired by her mother. Despite receiving a multiple sclerosis diagnosis at the age of 18, she went on to attend college and join the school cheerleading squad, but they had to confront the past once more after their world was destroyed 20 years ago. Christopher was granted parole in June 20. Tom Manning, the prosecutor, made the decision to attend the hearing. He had a strategy. Christopher Butler was questioned by him regarding all of his false statements made in court. Christopher could have insisted on his version and carried the truth to his grave, so it was a dangerous plan. However, he acknowledged that Michelle was never a part of the conspiracy and that they did not have a relationship. He blamed his ex-girlfriend Lisa Ramirez for the crime, but he refused to accept responsibility for it. He conveyed his profound apologies for the suffering his victims had endured as a result of him. Christopher acknowledged that he felt deeply moved by Michelle's book and that he regretted what he had done. Despite their forgiveness, Michelle and Bria opposed his release and repeatedly refused to let him go. They had a fundamentally different attitude toward Ortiz and the other 2 men. In court, he was the one who expressed regret to Michelle. Ortiz was released in January 2021 after Bria spoke favorably during his parole hearing. Working together in Michelle's newly established business, Michelle and Bria are now closer than ever. Michelle's 9-day healing journey to Alaska altered her worldview, and she wrote another book about it. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. A teenage girl from Uruguay went missing on December 28, 2014. Because of the strange circumstances surrounding her disappearance, word spread quickly around the world. She didn't go missing late at night in a dangerous neighborhood. Instead, she was walking along the beach in broad daylight, visible to everyone. But it appeared that the ground had opened up and swallowed her. No one saw anything, no one knew anything, and a few days later her body was discovered in a location thoroughly searched by police, raising a slew of new questions. Lola Chomnalez was born on November 4, 1999 in Buenos Aires, Argentina. She grew up with Adriana Belmonte and Diego Chomnalez, the son of the well-known chef Beatrice Chomnalez. When the girl turned 15, her parents decided to give her a trip to New York for the Christmas holidays. However, before that they sent their daughter to Rocha, Uruguay, to relax with her godmother's family for a few days. On December 27, Lola arrived in Uruguay. where she was greeted by her godmother, Claudia Fernandez. Claudia's photo captured the girl in a good mood. Claudia, her husband Hernan Zincunegui, and their 2 children were delighted when Lola arrived. They had intended to spend their few days together sunbathing on Barra de Valisas beach, swimming in the sea, and relaxing. That same evening, Lola, Hernan, and his 14-year-old stepson went to a drum festival in the city center. Hernan and the boy stayed by Lola's side in the crowd, but the boy eventually moved away because he was bored. Nonetheless, after the festival, they all returned home together. The following day, the family went to the beach. Lola requested permission to walk along the beach from her godmother around 3 p.m. She wanted to walk to Aguas Dulces, a spa resort, along a popular trail that would allow her to explore the area's flora and fauna. Claudia had no objections because the route was popular and safe for walks, and the locals were known for being friendly. She informed Lola of the time they would be waiting for her at home and watched her walk away calmly along the beach. Lola was wearing a bikini and denim shorts. She carried a backpack containing a sarong, a book, her ID, a water bottle, and a towel. She didn't have her phone with her because the reception on the beach was poor. The backpack also included a wallet containing 2,000 Uruguayan pesos. Several hours passed, it became dark, and Lola had not returned. Her godmother became worried. The family followed the route Lola had planned, but she was nowhere to be found. Claudia called Lola's parents that evening to explain what had occurred. She informed Adriana that she had already called the police. However, it took 45 minutes for them to arrive at the station and report the teenager's disappearance. The police began searching for Lola. Since she vanished during a walk on the beach, it was thoroughly searched both lengthwise and crosswise. Helicopters and search dogs were dispatched to assist with the search. Lola's parents quickly arrived in Uruguay to assist the police. Almost simultaneously with the start of the investigation, it was revealed that Adriana and Diego were receiving anonymous calls. The caller made no demands or asked for a ransom. They simply stated that Lola was with them and was fine. Unfortunately, this turned out to be incorrect. 2 days later, on December 30, her body was discovered partially covered in sand on the beach. She was in an area with a lot of dunes and thick vegetation. There were shallow knife cuts on her neck and signs of head trauma. The autopsy revealed that Lola was attacked from behind and then dragged or forced to the spot where she was discovered. The killer pressed her face into the sand until she suffocated. This was proven by the presence of sand in her lungs. The news of the crime sparked an unprecedented outcry in Argentina and Uruguay's press. As is customary in such cases, journalists began to propose theories about what could have happened. The Uruguayan police and media quickly focused their suspicions on Lola's godmother's family, particularly Hernan. There were various reasons for this. To begin, they told Adriana and Diego that they had already contacted the police, despite the fact that they had delayed their arrival at the station. Second, the media attempted to read something sinister into the fact that Lola, Hernan, and his 14-year-old stepson attended a drum festival together, but the boy eventually separated from them, leaving the girl with Hernan. A hypothesis regarding violence against Lola emerged, but the forensic expert discovered no evidence to support it. However, there were other reasons to suspect them. Claudia and Hernan immediately hired a lawyer, and none of the family members agreed to a polygraph test. Lola's parents fueled the fire with a series of bold statements. Diego in particular stated that he had long since lost trust in Hernan, which prompted additional questions. If he didn't trust the man, why did he let his daughter accompany them on their vacation? Claudia and Adriana had been friends for 25 years. Claudia's second husband was Hernan, whom Lola's parents had known for about 5 years. They all used to live in Argentina, but Hernan and Claudia moved to Uruguay. When Hernan was interrogated, investigators discovered contradictory statements, leading to his arrest on December 31. Diego was arrested for allegedly concealing evidence. Her son was also detained because he was suspected of making the anonymous calls. It is not certain who made the calls to Adriana and Diego, but it is clear that they were a failed attempt at a joke. Nonetheless, the police interrogated all 3 family members for several days and found no evidence against them. The investigators stated that they discovered some discrepancies in the testimonies, but they were minor. Hernan claimed they arrived home at 11 p.m., but his son said it was 12. Aside from that, there was nothing the police could charge Hernan, Claudia, or her son with. Therefore, on January 2, 2015, they were all released. The friendship appears to have deteriorated as a result of several public statements. Claudia and her loved ones never spoke to Lola's parents again or called to express their condolences. Adriana thinks their lawyer may have given them such advice. However, she believes that as friends, a simple human gesture would have been to call and express condolences, particularly given their 25-year friendship. Lola's pink backpack was discovered a few days after her death. It was also buried in the sand, about 200 meters from where Lola's body was discovered. This immediately prompted a slew of questions. How did the police not find the body and then the backpack despite searching the entire beach and its surroundings several times? Furthermore, the town's authorities had claimed from the start that the beach was very safe, which was strange because drug dealers operated there, particularly in the area where the body was discovered. Nonetheless, almost all of the girl's belongings were still in the backpack, with the exception of 2,000 pesos stolen from her wallet. Furthermore, there were bloodstains on the towel and the documents. Forensic experts examined the items and discovered Lola's DNA, but it was mixed with male DNA. Because Hernan's suspicions had not been completely dispelled, his DNA was compared to the one dispelled. It was compared to the one discovered. They also checked it against the Uruguayan police database, but there were no matches. Following the discovery of the backpack, one suspect created quite a stir. He was suspected based on witness accounts of his whereabouts on the day of the murder. According to locals, a man nicknamed El Conejo, the Rabbit, was working on a roof near the beach when the girl went for a walk. The man went to lunch in the middle of the day, and his co-workers were aware that he did not have any money with him. However, he came back with food and money. This immediately prompted the question of where he obtained the food, if he did not buy it. But that's not all. Someone claims to have seen him with a pink backpack on the day Lola went missing. According to one newspaper, he confessed to the murder, and other media outlets reported on the development. However, this turned out to be false. The man explained where he got the food, but police suspected he stole it from beachgoers. There was no evidence linking him to Lola's case. He never admitted to anything, and after being released, he filed a lawsuit against newspapers that published unverified information. The investigation had effectively stalled at this point. The primary suspects had already been released, and the investigators had no leads to follow. At first glance, it appeared that the girl knew no one in town, but she had managed to attend a drum festival in the city center and, being sociable and open, freely interacted with strangers. As a result, the police were compelled to investigate this lead. They detained and interrogated approximately 40 people, primarily beach vendors and dealers, but all were eventually released. The situation was aggravated further by the frequent changes in prosecutors and judges. When a new prosecutor was appointed, the case would be reviewed from the beginning. This severely hampered the investigation. But on February 18, 2015, there appeared to be some progress in the case. An anonymous call was made to police. The caller claimed that Angel Moreira, also known as El Cachila or Keisha, was involved in the crime. The man was arrested and interrogated by the police. He worked on the beach parking cars. Angel said he met Lola while she was walking on the beach. He approached her with some souvenir trinkets for sale. They spoke briefly about where the girl came from. When Lola mentioned feeling dizzy, Angel suggested they move to a shady area. He took her to a location with tall bushes and dunes for shade and coolness. The girl fell to her knees. Angel attempted to check her pulse but became scared when unable to hear it and fled. The statement sounded strange, but the police had to release him because there was no evidence. After 4 years, Jorge Basso, the new prosecutor in charge of the case, decided to re-interrogate Angel. The man was arrested following the interrogation on May 22, 2019. This time he was charged with obstruction of justice. His DNA did not match the DNA found on Lola's towel and documents, so the prosecutor concluded that he was covering up for the true perpetrator. According to Basso, Angel's 2015 statements revealed details that only Lola's companions would have known. He knew Lola had fallen to her knees in the sand, and a forensic expert confirmed this. Lola fell, however, not because she felt dizzy, but because she had received shallow knife wounds. Despite Angel's arrest, the Chomnalez family waited for an answer to the main question for years. until geneticist Natalia Sandberg became involved in the case. 7 years after the murder, the case took an important turn. The investigators' method of discovering the suspect is reminiscent of a detective novel plot. Natalia Sandberg had the idea to trace the genetic DNA of an unknown man discovered on Lola's towel and documents. There were no matches in the paternal line, but an examination of the maternal line revealed a minor match with a prisoner serving time for murder. In other words, the man who left blood on Lola's towel is related to the man who is currently serving a sentence. The third crime, which involved Marines who died in the naval complex on Faro de Montevideo, was the tip of the iceberg that led investigators to Lola Chomnalez's true killer. The murders happened on Sunday morning, May 31, 2020, and the three people, Juan Manuel Escobar, Alex Galinia, and Alan Rodriguez, were found with gunshot wounds to the head. Jonathan Brand Gundy was identified as the killer by police. Jonathan was born in Rocha. When the police discovered his mother and tested her DNA, it was clear that they were looking for another son of the woman, Jonathan's half-brother. The woman told the investigators that she had given birth to 11 children from various fathers, 8 of whom were boys, but only one son was placed for adoption at the age of 18 days. He turned out to be the person the police had been looking for 7 years. The suspect was identified as Leonardo Sena. During Lola's murder in 2014, Sena was homeless, dividing his time between La Paloma, Chuy, and Castillos. He lived in these places, working odd jobs. He recently settled in Chuy, where he lives with a girlfriend and works in a bakery. Between 2003 and 2009, the man had a history of police records for aggression, theft, and violence. Despite his involvement with the law, his DNA was not stored in the database because it was created after 2012. As a result, on May 18, 2022, the police issued a search warrant for his home. They expected the man to refuse to provide his DNA, and they were correct. However, forensic experts looked at the man's toothbrush and comb. To the surprise and delight of the forensic experts, the DNA match was 99.9%, indicating that it was his DNA. The suspect was arrested at the Brazilian border on May 19th. During the interrogation, Leonardo claimed he had no involvement in the crime. Regarding the DNA found on the identification card and the girl's towel, he stated that he found a pink backpack on the beach. When he looked inside, he saw a wallet containing 2,000 pesos and stole it. Concerning the blood, he stated that he had cut himself with a bottle shard at work a few hours prior, and when he reached into the backpack, the bandage came off and the cuts began bleeding. So he wiped his hand on Lola's towel. However, there were several inconsistencies in his account. For starters, his blood was mixed with the girl's blood rather than simply found on her belongings. This would not have happened if he had simply found the backpack and removed the wallet. Second, according to his own words, someone other than Leonardo took Lola's backpack on the 28th, the day of the murder, after Leonardo stole the money and mysteriously buried it 4 kilometers away from where it was found, without taking anything from it. Even the suspect couldn't deny the absurdity of the story. Finally, his colleagues from December 2014 did not recall the incident involving the broken bottle and Leonardo's cut. Furthermore, according to documents, Leonardo was no longer working at the brewery on the day of the crime. According to police, Lola was stopped by Leonardo and Angel while walking on the beach on December 28, 2014. They dragged her through dunes and bushes. Lola attempted to flee, but the kidnappers struck her on the head several times and stabbed her in the neck, knocking her to her knees. However, Lola's wounds were not fatal and she resisted. She most likely screamed loudly to get the attention of other vacationers or beach vendors. In an attempt to silence Lola, they pressed her face into the sand. They pushed for too long, causing Lola to suffocate. The police believe the crime was motivated by violence, but the assailants were unable to carry out their intended act and ended up killing her because they did not anticipate such fierce resistance from the teenage girl. This hypothesis is supported by the fact that Leonardo was previously tried in a case similar to Lola's. That happened in 2009. When Leonardo was 26 years old, the victim was a 15-year-old girl, just like Lola. Leonardo pursued her for a few blocks before attacking her with a knife. He dragged the victim into a remote wooded area where he assaulted her. Uruguayan police believed that at least 2 people were involved in the attack on Lola. As a result, they charged Leonardo with aggravated murder and Angel with harboring a criminal. Jorge Basso sought a 10-year prison sentence for Angel and 15 for 30 years for Leonardo. A judge granted Angel conditional early release under oath in June 2021, after he had been in prison since 2019. Despite psychiatric and psychological evaluations describing Angel as aggressive and impulsive, the judge found no grounds to accuse him of harboring a criminal. Harboring involves assisting a criminal after the crime has been committed. Angel should have faced charges as an accomplice in this case. The judge determined that Angel Morera's actions did not constitute harboring. The prosecutor filed an appeal against the judge's decision, arguing that Angel was present before, during, and after the crime. Despite their initial suspicions, Lola's parents, Adriana and Diego, believe the evidence presented by the police, agree that 2 suspects were involved in the crime, and wish for a quick verdict. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. A woman who was determined to return home safely to her children risked her life to get out of a predator's grasp. She had no idea that her courage in assisting in the kidnapper's capture would reveal a much more sinister force and save the lives of innumerable others. By working with the police, she was able to expose the rapist's true identity as well as that of a serial killer. Her testimony's credibility was called into question, though, given the process used to retrieve her memories of the assault. Shackled in chains, the prisoner paced the field, moving across the ground with deliberate steps. He lost himself in recollections, his gaze never leaving the tall yellow grass. The simple clothes he used to wear, jeans, a shirt, and a cap, had become luxurious, and his once dark auburn beard had gone completely gray since his last visit. He was now with police officers, the very people he had avoided for almost 20 years. The prisoner had recently broken his lengthy silence by confessing to the disappearances of multiple young women in the 1990s and agreeing to help the police locate their bodies, which were buried in a field outside of Houston, Texas. Families in Texas and Oklahoma had been tormented for years by the loss of their daughters, who had disappeared in the middle of routine situations, like going for a morning run, getting washed, or coming home from a theater group party. There were no answers for a long time. Finally, the man who had caused their pain, a 56-year-old Texas prisoner who was charged with violence and kidnapping but not murder, spoke. At least 7 victims, including 4 girls who did not survive their interactions with him, were connected to him by the police. When taken as a whole, these cases depicted a serial killer posing as a good Samaritan who preyed on a particular kind of young brunette who was discovered on the streets. Although his surprising admission helped reveal the truth about what had happened to some of the victims, the family's most important question was still, why? Sandra Soppel, then 19 years old, completed her high school education and began working as an exotic dancer in May 1997. She was bringing up 2 kids and getting ready to have a third. Sandra's intelligence and determination, which would ultimately save her life and open a Pandora's box of horrific crimes, were characterized by those who knew her. An frightened young woman called the police on May 17, 1997. Sandra was the one. She described the nightmare she had just gone through. She had been abducted and had thrown herself out of a moving car in a last-ditch attempt to get away. She was taken to a nearby hospital after reporting the crime, and despite her severe injuries, she insisted on talking to detectives. Keeping the kidnapper from hurting anyone else was her top priority. But the fall from the car had messed with her memory, and she had forgotten important details of the crime in her subconscious. Later on, Sandra's recollection would prove to be crucial in cracking the case. After failing to find any early leads, the police changed their strategy and had Sandra put under hypnosis. She remembered specifics of the attack after the session. She remembered the kidnapper's face in addition to the make, model, and color of his vehicle. The police's suspicions about a possible suspect were confirmed by this discovery. Sandra was asked to choose her assailant from a lineup a few weeks following the hypnosis. A man named William Lewis Rice was indicated by her gesture. The police had seen Rice before. He had long been of interest due to his criminal past and actions. Although Rice had a challenging upbringing, he had a strong bond with his mother, who would stop at nothing to help him. Rice was born and raised on a farm in Yukon, Oklahoma. He left school to work as a horseshoer in the 9th grade. He married Judy Fleming, a shy girl he met in Anadarko, Oklahoma, when he was 19 years old. Judy remembered that if she didn't date Rice, he would shoot himself. She initially thought he had good intentions, but she quickly discovered he was capable of extreme cruelty. Their turbulent marriage was characterized by violence and adultery. After Rice broke into her new house, beat her, and put a knife to her throat, Judy finally filed for divorce. Even after getting married and getting divorced once more, Rice's violence spiraled out of control due to his growing hatred of women. Rice's first attack is known to have occurred in the spring of 1986, when her Mustang broke down on Interstate 35. The 19-year-old aerobics instructor, daughter of a sheriff's deputy, found herself stranded. Rice offered to help, but instead he kidnapped her, taped her hands together, and pushed her into his truck's sleeper cabin. After saying he loved her and that they would live together in Houston, he later attacked her. By calling her family from a payphone and feigning the need to use the restroom, the girl was able to get away. For the kidnapping and assault, Rice was taken into custody and given a 25-year prison term. However, because of prosecutorial misconduct, an appellate court lowered his sentence to 10 years in October 1996. Following his release, Rice went back to Anadarko to live with his mother, where he assimilated. His background was unknown to many locals, and he came across as modest and courteous. But by the spring of 1997, local young women were starting to go missing. Now in his late 30s, Rice had relocated to Houston, where he continued shoeing horses and working on construction sites. Although his actions raised suspicions, there was no hard proof that he was responsible for the crimes. When Sandra Sapal identified Rice, it was the last straw for the police. By connecting him to Sandra's attack and other unresolved crimes, they compiled evidence against him. Rice's trial took place in April 1998. In her testimony regarding her kidnapping, Sandra described how Rice had threatened her with a knife, cut her tire, and enticed her to his vehicle. She talked about how she thought her risky escape had saved her life. The defense, however, contested her testimony, claiming that Rice's name and photo might have distorted her memory and that hypnosis was unreliable. In spite of these defenses, the jury convicted Rice of aggravated kidnapping and gave him a 60-year prison term. The community experienced brief respite after Rice was imprisoned, but it wasn't until years later that he came forward with his most sinister secrets. Detectives were able to re-examine cold cases in the mid-2000s thanks to developments in DNA testing. In one instance, Tiffany Johnston, a 19-year-old recently married woman, was kidnapped in July 1997 from a car wash in Bethany, Oklahoma. Although her body was discovered the following day, the case wasn't resolved until 2015, when Rice was connected to the crime by DNA evidence. In order to avoid being executed, Rice consented to assist law enforcement, which helped them locate the remains of two additional victims, Kelly Cox and Jessica Kane, who were interred in the Texas killing fields. Although Rice's motivations were still unknown, his confessions gave his victims' families closure. Some saw his cooperation as a perverted form of pride, while others thought it was motivated by a wish to avoid the death penalty. In any case, his crimes left a path of destruction, and those he had harmed received some justice when he was ultimately sentenced to death. In addition to saving her own life, Sandra Sapal's courage and tenacity helped expose a serial killer who had been terrorizing communities for years. Her story serves as a testament to the tenacity of people who are not intimidated into silence, and her bravery made sure that Rice could no longer prey on innocent lives. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. On May 13, 2015, around 5 p.m., firefighters extinguished a raging fire in a garage by the road in the village of Sand Lake, Michigan. At that moment, a terrified woman dashed up to their car, screaming that her neighbors had died. Several firefighters accompanied the woman to her neighbor's house. 2 lifeless bodies lay on the bedroom floor in a pool of blood. It appeared that they'd been shot. To preserve the evidence at the crime scene, the firefighters avoided touching anything and immediately informed the police that they had discovered 2 bodies and needed investigators and forensic experts. Forensic experts had been at the crime scene for about an hour, collecting evidence and photographing the bodies of 46-year-old Martin Durham and 47-year-old Glenna Durham, when one officer noticed a small movement in Glenna's chest. He rushed to her body and attempted to feel for a pulse, but Glenna's eyes opened wide and she sat up abruptly, screaming, "What are you doing, Marty?" The officer immediately summoned paramedics, who transported the injured woman to the local hospital. Marty and Glenna met as teenagers in the early 1980s. Marty invited the girl on a date to a local open-air theater, where they both lost their virginity in the same evening, with little interest in the film itself. Their relationship progressed quickly and passionately, but it ended after a few months, in part because Glenna, 17, married soon after. Marty started a family on his own. Christina Keller was 14 years old when she met Marty, then 19, at a party at his house. The young man appeared charming and amusing to the girl, but also a little strange because he immediately declared that he would marry her someday. Marty arrived on her doorstep the following day. He must have made a good impression on Christina's parents, because he has never left her life since. Their friendship turned into a romantic relationship, and Christina, then 16, discovered she was expecting their first child. Within 2 years, she was carrying their second son, prompting the young couple to marry. Christina and her husband had a daughter 11 months later. Christina was 19 and Marty was 24 at the time. Initially, the young family lived with relatives, but in early 1995, Marty secured a higher-paid job at a factory in Michigan, and the family of 5 relocated. However, Marty was involved in a car accident on the evening of February 16, 1995, on his way home from work. Another vehicle speeding through a red light collided with his vehicle. The larger vehicle nearly crushed Marty's car, trapping him inside. Marty was transported to the hospital, where he had been clinically dead for approximately 5 minutes. He suffered severe injuries to his left side and was in a coma for more than 3 weeks. When he regained consciousness, he had no memory of his wife, children, or much of his previous life. He spent a year and a half learning to walk, speak, eat, and care for himself again. Christina provided physical support for him during this time. Marty began to resemble his former self, but psychologically he had changed. He became enraged as a result of the brain trauma. He never fought with his wife or children, but he became a domineering figure. Even his sense of humor grew darker. Christina filed for divorce in 2000, nearly 5 years after the accident. She still cared deeply for her husband, but her feelings had shifted to a more maternal nature, as she had taken on the role of his caregiver and could no longer relate to him in any other way. Marty purchased his first home in May 2001 using funds from the insurance company and a bank loan. The house was located in Sand Lake, Michigan, a small village with a population of 500 people. Marty was overjoyed with his new home, which he had moved into with his 2 sons and an African gray parrot named Bud. 2 months after moving in, Marty received a knock on his door from a 16-year-old girl claiming to be his daughter. Marty inquired as to her mother's identity, and Glenna, his first love, revealed herself. The girl knew her mother had an affair early in their marriage, and she was born a few months after. She wished to establish her paternity for certain. A DNA test confirmed that the girl was Marty's biological daughter, born outside of marriage. Clearly, Glenna had never forgotten Marty, as she had a tattoo of his name on her arm throughout their marriage. Glenna divorced her husband and moved in with Marty. They were very happy together, and they quickly had a new wedding ceremony. Glenna's new husband was everything to her. The couple spent their entire time together, visiting family and going to the local casino once or twice a week. Glenna would sit in the car and read a novel while Marty went hunting. Glenna was paid $3,200 per month to care for her husband, after officially taking on the responsibility. Marty received more than $1,000 in disability benefits each month. Glenna also sold Marty's excess medication, bringing their total monthly income to around $5,000. When Marty's sons moved out, this income was enough to support them in the small village. However, by 2010, Marty's mental and physical health had deteriorated significantly. The couple continued to spend their entire time together and with their friends, including Connie and Keith Ream, another neighboring couple. On Monday, May 11, 2015, Marty offered to mow Connie and Keith's backyard. He enjoyed the work and did it for free. Later that evening, Connie, Keith, Marty, and Glenna sat on the neighbor's terrace, and the Durhams returned home around 9 p.m. Keith sent Marty a message the next day, Tuesday at 8:26 a.m., asking how he was feeling, but he did not receive a response. This was strange because Marty was always quick to return calls and messages. Throughout the day, Keith sent several more messages to his friend, all with the same result. Later that day, Connie approached her neighbor's door and knocked. She heard the Durham's dog bark, but no one opened the door. Keith even sent a joking message to Glenna, asking, "What did you do to Marty?" But she didn't respond either. On Wednesday at 7:30 a.m., Connie approached the neighbor's house again and rang the doorbell. The only response she got was the dog barking. She walked around the house, checking for any open doors or windows. Everything remained locked as usual. Throughout the day, Connie and Keith attempted to contact their neighbors, growing increasingly concerned. After work, around 4:30 p.m., Connie approached the neighbor's house for the third time and knocked. She assumed she'd have to break the door, but when she touched the handle, she discovered it wasn't locked. This time, Connie cautiously opened the door and called out for the neighbors, but she was only greeted by the Durham family pet, who led her into the living room, which was a gruesome mess. Documents and photographs were all over the place, along with a broken lamp and other miscellaneous items. Connie followed Shelby into the bedroom and discovered the homeowners lying on the floor in a pool of blood. Marty was only wearing underwear, whereas Glenna was fully dressed, her legs covered by a blanket. Connie dashed out of the neighbor's house and ran toward a fire truck she saw further down the road. Marty did not have the same luck as his wife. He was shot 5 times in the back, forearm, and chest, leaving him with no chance of survival. He'd been dead for a few days. Glenna was shot twice, both times hitting the area behind her right ear. Blood was discovered not only in the bedroom, but also on a chair in the living room and a pillow with 2 bullet holes. Under the chair, a gun and 2 empty shells were discovered. In the bedroom, there were 5 more shell casings, 1 near the door and 4 near Marty's body, for a total of 7. However, the gun found near the chair was designed to fire 6 bullets. This indicates that the perpetrator had time to reload the gun before continuing to shoot. Aside from the living room and bedroom, the rest of the house appeared to be in perfect order. There were no signs of forced entry, and the kitchen table was set with a bowl of spaghetti and a piece of garlic bread. Later that evening, when Glenna was taken to the hospital, Marty's children were allowed to bring the family pets, a dog and a parrot, to their mother's home, Christina. Despite the fact that the children were only allowed to take the pets, the trio took advantage of the opportunity to search the house and discovered a sealed envelope labeled "Personal." Inside, they discovered letters from Glenna addressed to her children and ex-husband. In the letters, she expressed her love for the children and apologized for not being the best mother. She also asked her ex-husband to care for the children. In Glenna's drawer, they also discovered a packet of unpaid bills. They handed over all of their findings to the police. The investigators began questioning the family's relatives and friends about their personal and financial situations. They enjoyed spending time together and became completely absorbed in each other's company. However, it quickly became clear that they were having serious financial difficulties. Glenna was in charge of the family's finances, and relatives suspected Marty was unaware of the gravity of the situation because he was so frugal. On the other hand, Glenna had developed a serious gambling addiction. She would buy hundreds of lottery tickets and lose thousands of dollars at the casino. But whenever her husband approached her, she pretended to be playing with $1 bills. Glenna played every week, and in 2010, she spent $75,000 on her addiction. The family had fallen behind on tax payments, had credit card debt, and Marty's car was about to be repossessed. However, their most pressing concern was their home. Glenna hadn't made mortgage payments in over a year, and they owed $48,000. Marty's mother saw a list of homes that would be seized due to debts in early April 2015, a few weeks before the family was attacked. Marty's address was on the list. She called Glenna, who assured her that the newspaper had printed the incorrect address and that she would resolve the issue. Of course, it turned out that their home was being repossessed. Despite the fact that Marty had taken out a mortgage, Glenna received notice on April 28 that their home would be auctioned if they did not pay $5,000. Interestingly, the auction was scheduled for May 12th, just one day before Marty and Glenna were discovered by their neighbor. The investigators concluded that Marty was unaware of the impending loss of their home because he had been renovating it for the previous 2 months. He painted the bathroom just 2 days before they died. Glenna was able to regain consciousness after 3 days in intensive care. She had no recollection of the day of the murders or the days before. She couldn't remember writing the letters to her children or ex-husband. Because the eyewitness couldn't provide any useful information, the police had few leads or clues to work with. Marty, an avid hunter, frequently showed his firearms to friends, so the weapon contained multiple DNA samples. Glenna and Marty did, however, sell drugs for cash, and large sums of money were kept in envelopes in a safe. Could it have been an unplanned robbery? The living room was in disarray, as if someone had been looking for something and the money from the safe was missing. This version of events appeared to be the most plausible, but finding the killer among their illegal clients was like looking for a needle in a haystack. It took a full year before an unexpected witness helped solve the case. Bud, a 19-year-old parrot, had been living with Christina for the previous 12 months. Bud was an African gray parrot with the unique ability to mimic not only sounds and words in his environment, but also human voices. Originally, he was Christina's beloved pet, but Marty took him, presumably to retaliate against his ex-wife for leaving. When Bud returned to his beloved owner, he began repeating various conversations he had overheard while living with Marty, such as how Marty interacted with the dog. However, at some point, he started repeating an argument between a man and a woman. They were clearly arguing with one another, raising their voices and occasionally mixing profanity with everyday words. At the end of the conversation, a male voice said loudly, "No, don't shoot." Christina recorded this scene performed by the parrot on video, but did not report it to the police because she assumed it would be laughed off. However, a year after Marty's murder, a local journalist interviewed his mother, and she mentioned the video. The journalist became very interested and broadcast it on the news. The video quickly went viral, prompting the police to reopen the investigation and narrow their focus on one suspect, Glenna Durham. They examined Marty and Glenna's phones and discovered that Marty's last action on his phone was to search for information about lawnmowers on the evening of the 11th after returning home from the neighbors. The examination of Glenna's phone proved to be far more intriguing. It had been used until the 13th, when the bodies were discovered. Since 3:32 a.m., someone used the phone 5 times between 4 and 4:48 a.m. to learn more about the gun used in the shootings, including how to reload it. The final message was sent to Glenna's mother at 4:48 a.m. and said, "I love you, please forgive me." Glenna was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. She maintained her innocence, and her lawyer attempted to show that another family member or a stranger had broken into the house to steal medication, cash, or Marty's weapons. However, the forensic experts found no evidence of forced entry into the house. What about the money from the safe? Marty's children had taken it while they were searching the house for Glenna, who had been taken to the hospital, and their father to the mortuary. When investigators discovered this, they claimed that no one had asked them about the money at the police station, so they did not say anything. In any case, the version of a robber was abandoned because nothing was stolen. The prosecution's version of events seemed much more plausible. They believed Marty was killed on the morning of the 12th because he was wearing underwear. When the man realized he was going to lose the house, he became very upset, and a heated argument ensued. Marty attempted to flee into the bedroom after Glenna grabbed the weapon. She shot him in the back. Marty was still on his feet, reaching for another weapon from the bedside table. Glenna fired again, striking his forearm. Only then did he turn to face her, and she fired 3 more shots into his chest. Marty lay lifeless on the bedroom floor. Glenna spent the entire day completing paperwork. She wrote letters to her ex-husband and children and made spaghetti for lunch. Glenna was still engaged in these activities when the neighbor first arrived at her house on the evening of the 12th. Glenna planned her next steps, knowing that her and Marty's neighbors would become concerned regardless. She needed to act fast. She sat in a chair in the living room, placed a pillow against her head, and fired. However, nothing occurred. The pillow absorbed the impact of the shot, and the bullet only grazed her. She had to look up how to reload the pistol because it was down to its last bullet. This means she didn't try again until the early morning of the 13th, when she sent a message to her mother. Perhaps she still had doubts when Connie knocked on the door again at 7:30 a.m. and found it still locked. But after Connie left, Glenna must have unlocked the door, sat in the chair, grabbed the pillow, and tried again. This time, the injury was more severe, but her doctor later explained that she did not strike any important veins or arteries or penetrate the skull. It's difficult to imagine what condition she was in, but because head wounds always bleed profusely, she may have decided to simply bleed out. She made her way to the bedroom, where her husband's body had been lying all along, and collapsed on the floor, a blanket covering her legs. It's unclear whether she staged a scene when the police officer touched her or simply regained consciousness at that point, and we may never find out, because Glenna continues to claim memory loss. The jury believed the prosecution's version. On Wednesday, July 19, 2017, after 9 hours of deliberation, they found her guilty of murder. Glenna Durham was sentenced to life imprisonment. Of course, the parrot named Bud was not called as a witness in court, and it's not because he swears a lot. It is simply impossible to prove that he did not hear that particular dialogue on television or radio, let alone take an oath on the witness stand. In other words, if Bud had been involved in the process and it had been less than 24 hours since Glenna's guilty verdict, her lawyer would have filed an appeal. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Gisela Diode heard her phone ring at 2 in the morning on March 1, 2011. The screen displayed an unidentified number. A Valence police officer approached her and inquired as to whether she was Samira Bernard's mother. Gisela said yes, but she didn't understand why the police were searching for Samira, her 20-year-old daughter. It had been 3 days since she last saw her. The police response did nothing to calm the woman, who demanded an explanation of what was going on. According to the call, Samira's boyfriend, Mile Columbia, 22, had vanished, so they were looking for her. The young couple had been dating for 8 months, the police had found out, but Gisela had no knowledge of the man. Mile had met Samira at a party. Samira Ben-Sard was a stunning woman who knew she was beautiful. She enjoyed posing for pictures and aspired to be a model. In turn, Mile was a very pleasant and kind young man. Their attraction to one another was instantaneous, and they began dating. But at 9:45 p.m. on February 28, 2011, Mile's supervisor at the construction company called the police. Since he hadn't heard from his employee in 3 days, he was concerned. When the man arrived at work on Saturday morning, his phone rang. Without giving a reason, he hurried to his feet and disappeared, never to be seen again. His boss was taken aback when he still hadn't arrived on Monday morning. It was his first absence from work, and they regarded him as a responsible and punctual worker. After learning that Mile was not returning calls from friends and co-workers, his boss made the decision to call the police. The police first visited the man's residence in Valence's downtown, but their efforts were unsuccessful, as no one answered the doorbell, nor was his car at the house. The police spoke with Mile's mother that same evening. She mentioned that she hadn't heard from her son in 3 days and that he had acted strangely during their most recent meeting, acting tense and very emotional. The woman reported that her son, who had never done so before, gave her a hug, kissed her, and declared his love for her. The investigators found some very suspicious details. Samira and Mile vanished the same day without telling anyone why, and they hadn't spoken to their families in 3 days. It couldn't have happened by accident. Analyzing their phones yielded one hint. The investigators discovered that Samira and Mile did not simply depart simultaneously, rather they drove off together. According to the phone pings, they left for Nice in the middle of the day on Saturday and checked into a 5-star hotel on the promenade in the evening. After getting in touch with the hotel, the investigators discovered that 2 men and a woman were being recorded by security cameras. Samira and Mile fit the description exactly. By Sunday evening, they had traveled from Nice to Livorno, 400 kilometers east of the French-Italian border. It was evident that the young couple was moving deeper into Italy, so the French police asked their Italian counterparts for help. Mile had made reservations at a high-end Livorno hotel. A man and a woman who fit the description of the missing couple had stayed with the hotel, according to the staff. Thus, they spent Saturday night in Nice before traveling to Livorno the following day. Everything suggested that Samira and Mile had taken a haphazard romantic trip, which was not surprising given how popular the Riviera was for such excursions, since Samira's mother had received a message from her daughter saying that she had left, but that there was no need to worry because she would return soon. The detectives had no reason to doubt their belief that the young couple would soon return home together. Although it appeared to be another affirmation that the young couple was doing well, Gazella was positive her daughter would never vanish simply by taking an impulsive vacation. Samira never skipped work and was a responsible woman. Additionally, Gazella was troubled by a detail. She couldn't comprehend how her daughter, who loved being photographed and never left the house without wearing carefully chosen clothes, applying makeup and styling her hair, could leave for several days with a young man without taking anything with her. The fact that Samira sent an SMS also baffled her. The problem is that she would typically just give her mom a call. Since they were close and could talk for hours, getting a text message didn't make her feel any better. On the contrary, it made her anxiety even worse. The city of Imperia, which is about 80 kilometers from Nice in northern Italy, provided the next update on the case. Massimo Bessin was traveling to work on Monday, March 3, 2011, when he decided to take a shortcut and turned onto a small street. Something odd caught his attention along the road. When he opened the door, he saw that it was a woman, but initially he thought he saw a mannequin. Massimo yelled something but got no answer, but the woman was obviously on the move. He summoned an ambulance in a hurry. She was identified by Italian police as the French woman who had gone missing. Her skull was pierced by a bullet that had been shot in the back of her head. At this point, the romantic trip theory could be disregarded. The French police couldn't understand. They first believed it to be a romantic escape, then it was a suspicious disappearance, and now they were dealing with a girl who had been injured in an attempted murder. Despite being critically ill, Samira was still alive. Her mother was notified and she was taken to the hospital right away. At first, Gazella didn't even recognize her own daughter when she got to the hospital. The sight is hard to describe. Samira looked like a 9-year-old girl with her head shaved bald. The woman found it hard to accept that her daughter had been shot in the head and ended up in Italy. Since the bullet was embedded in her daughter's skull, the doctors informed the mother that there was little chance of recovery. Gazella refused to accept this and made arrangements for Samira to be taken to a hospital in Marseille. She was told directly by a surgeon there that although he would do the surgery, he would not give her false hope. The patient would never fully recover, even if she lived. Samira had surgery for 10 hours. Despite surviving the surgery, she was unable to speak and did not recognize anyone when she opened her eyes. Like a child, she had to relearn everything. Samira was unable to provide any information regarding the events in Italy, but without her testimony, the police had to look for the perpetrator. There were numerous signs that the crime was being planned. The Italian police were unable to locate any of her possessions when they discovered her lying on the side of the road close to a landfill. No passport, no phone, and no purse were present. This suggested that the criminal did not want her name to be revealed, but the investigators had a lead. Samira's boyfriend, Mile Cambia, was the last person they saw her with. According to the police, Mile fled after committing the crime by crossing the border into Italy, but after Samira was discovered, he erred by using his bank card in France. Only 35 kilometers from his Valence apartment, he used it at a first-rate hotel in Les Turrets. Mile had returned to France the day before according to surveillance footage. But why didn't he return home to his family if he was innocent? He chose to stay in a hotel a few kilometers away instead. Investigators soon learned that he had used Samira's credit card, which was another error on his part. In other words, Miles stayed in a hotel and used the woman's card while the young couple went on an impromptu trip to another country, where the woman almost died. The worst suspicions of the police were validated by everything. The detective talked to the young man's friends and family in an attempt to find a motive. Samira and Miles' relationship was evidently far from ideal. Mile was bothered by the fact that Samira was a very attractive woman and that many men were interested in her. Their disagreements frequently turned violent. In front of their friends, Mile had the authority to slap Samira, and once he even put out a cigarette on her. He was obviously not a particularly stable individual. However, the motive remained a mystery. Was everything prearranged, or did Mile act out of rage? Despite Mile's actions, all of their friends were aware that Samira was smitten with him. She'd just learned, though, that her boyfriend was married. He had cheated on his girlfriend on a regular basis after getting married to her when she was 18. He had many mistresses besides Samira. Despite being upset by the information, she didn't end their relationship because she trusted Miles' statement that they were divorcing and living apart. The investigator went to Miles' house after learning of this, but as soon as he stepped inside, he saw that Samira was wrong. The husband and wife were obviously living together. In addition, Mile would soon become a father. The name Combi was written on 17 ultrasound pictures of the apartment. A love triangle involving Mile, his wife, and Samira was clearly in place, and one of them was bound to vanish. Finding Mile was essential, and it was far simpler than the police had expected. 5 days after the disappearance, Mile Cambia turned himself in on March 4 at the Valence police station. The investigation was extremely fortunate to have this. Mile not only willingly arrived at the station, but he also came clean and admitted to shooting Samira. He went on to describe what had transpired. According to the young man, Samira was merely a friend with whom he could have fun. She knew there was no future in their relationship. Samira was unable to accept Miles' explanation that their romance was over. She never left him alone, calling him non-stop and occasionally dialing his number 150 times in a single day. He showed the investigator his phone, which showed evidence of about 1,000 calls from Samira in a month. Although Mile acknowledged that Samira's actions might be categorized as stalking, would this be sufficient grounds to shoot her? The young man soon began to fear for his life as the situation worsened. He described the events of the Friday night before they left for Italy. He was kissing another woman in a nightclub when Samira confronted him. After leaving the club in a hurry and using her key to scratch his car, she got into a fight with Samira's cousins. Mile was frightened by this incident, since they threatened to kill him and claimed to have weapons. Mile was terrified. After deciding that he needed to find a way to protect himself going forward, he hurriedly got into his car and drove out of the nightclub. He considered purchasing a weapon for his personal protection. When he received a call the following day, he left without thinking and went to buy a revolver. Still, none of this clarified why he had shot Samira. Mile clarified that his intention in traveling to Italy was not to murder her or carry out any other heinous deed. All he wanted was for their tumultuous relationship to end. In an attempt to defuse their tense situation and give Samira an explanation, he took her to Italy, but things didn't work out. Mile got out of the car after they argued once more. Samira trailed after him. Mile claims that he did not intend to shoot when he grabbed the weapon, only to frighten her, but the revolver accidentally went off. Then he dropped her to the ground, climbed back into the car, and drove off. He claimed to be afraid when asked why he didn't call for an ambulance. He didn't know what to do, so he went into hiding for a few days after she fell. The police already knew the rest of the story. In general, the man asserted that what transpired in Italy was an accident, and that he was the victim of his compulsive lover's pursuit. The police weren't entirely convinced by his explanation, so he was arrested for attempted murder. A few things didn't add up. Why would someone go abroad and stay in a 5-star hotel only to break up with someone? Why did he use her credit card after stealing all of her personal items, and who used her daughter's phone to send Samira's mother the message? Although it was hard to prove without Samira's testimony, the investigator was certain that the young man was lying. Thankfully, Samira was able to testify after some time and therapy. First, though, Samira spoke very slowly and in a weak voice. She gave her account of what happened 8 months after the attack on October 11, 2011. Samira's statements ran counter to what her ex-lover had said. He said they needed to talk when he arrived at her house. He persisted, so she gave in, even though she didn't want to. She accepted Miles' invitation to a weekend retreat. When she asked him where he wanted to go, he said, Spain. The fact that this upset her made him take her to Nice, and then to Italy. Mile abruptly swerved off the road on the 3rd day of the journey, following 2 days of relaxation. He told her not to worry, saying he just needed to get rid of something, when she questioned why he had turned onto a road that led to a landfill. Mile halted the vehicle and exited. After letting her out through the passenger side door, he took out a revolver and aimed it at her. She was going to die, he said. She yelled, "Shoot if you're a man," and he pulled the trigger. The revolver was discovered by forensic experts on February 7, 2012, 1 year after the attack on Samira, and this finding totally disproved Miles' allegations. He claimed that the gun in his hand suddenly detonated. Ballistic analysis, however, demonstrated that such an occurrence was impossible. The shooter must carefully prepare before firing, pull the trigger back, and then fire. 2 separate actions, the expert explained. The revolver won't just fire when you wave your hand. In addition, the revolver must be held in one hand while a considerable amount of force is applied with the other hand to pull the trigger backward. There was no way such a gun could be accidentally fired. Mile Cambia lied because he intended to murder Samira. Detectives were finally able to piece together the murderer's plan after months of investigation. Mile left work on February 26, 2011 at 9 in the morning. He bought a weapon because he was determined to prevent a recurrence of the scene from the night before. He loaded it, tested it, pulled the trigger, and fired it as he made his way into the woods. Everything had been planned by him. Samira was to vanish across the border after spending a romantic weekend in Italy. Since he had no connections in Italy, it was the ideal place to carry out the crime. Mile pulled the woman out of the car, drove off the road, shot her, and threatened to kill her. In order to avoid identifying her, he then took her possessions. Miles tried to deceive the police by sending Samira's mother an SMS after returning to France. It was assumed that the woman had taken a vacation and was still alive. The man was sure he would never be caught and thought he had committed the ideal crime. You can only imagine how shocked he was to learn that his victim had lived. He hid for 5 days close to his hometown while the police searched for him, thinking about what he should do next. He came up with a new self-defense tactic since he lacked the resources and beneficial contacts to flee. Mile Cambia made the decision to tell his version of events to the police. The trial of Mile started in the city of Valence on February 10, 2014. For the victim and her family, the trial was a true ordeal. Mile stuck to his version of events, much to their astonishment. He maintained that everything that transpired in Italy was a regrettable accident, and that he was the victim in this instance, having been harassed by Samira. According to his friends, he had never been violent and bought the revolver out of fear after Samira's cousins threatened to kill Mile and destroy his car and apartment. He took his phone with him when he drove to Italy, keeping nothing hidden. He was emotionally worn out from Samira's incessant calls and just wanted to take the woman on a trip to help her relax. It is also important to note that Mile charmed the jury with his exaggerated displays of civility and respect throughout the trial. His plan worked, and he received a 13-year prison sentence. The lenient sentence raised questions about whether Miles' actions in court and the jury's decision to impose a relatively short sentence were related. After all, it is hard for people to convict a charming young man with impeccable manners, and they frequently associate criminals with unpleasant personalities. Samira feels that this penalty is excessively light. She will always be confined to a wheelchair because she loved a man who chose to kill her, but by the time he turns 40, he will be free and able to lead a normal life. According to the surgeon, Samira recovered 80% of her abilities in a year of therapy, but the effectiveness of rehabilitation drastically decreased after that, leaving her reliant on assistance for the remainder of her life. She acknowledges that he paid her back in this way because she was prepared to do anything for love. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments, what part of this story shocked you the most? Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. Aurora, then 26 years old, and Mark, then 32, decided to take their honeymoon to the stunning island of Corsica in the late spring of 1995. The girl had chosen this location for their first vacation together after Aurora and Mark got married 2 months prior. The young wife was eager to see Corsica's villages, mountains, and beautiful scenery. They made a stop in the quaint little town of Calvi that day. Here, a restaurant with a view of the bay hosted a candlelit dinner for the newlyweds in the harbor. Following dinner, Aurora and Mark made their way to the Notre Dame de la Serra Chapel, a well-liked tourist destination where lovers go to watch the sunset, the perfect location for a romantic day's end. Around 10:30 in the evening, they got into their car and drove back to the hotel. Right at the end of the railing, some animals abruptly leaped onto the road in front of the car, putting the young couple on a very dangerous road that descended sharply. The car plunged off the cliff as Mark swiftly turned the wheel. Aurora remained calm in spite of the dire circumstances. Before the car fell, she jumped out and opened the door. Mark was less fortunate. He and the car fell 140 meters. Aurora was alive, but she was in shock. In the middle of the night, in complete darkness, she bravely decided to go down barefoot to assist her husband. After locating Mark inside the vehicle, Aurora dragged him out. She washed his face and pulled him by the legs toward the sea. The girl then ascended the cliff once more in order to signal for assistance and stop a passing vehicle. Calvi firefighters showed up on the scene. Her husband was down there with a head injury and unconscious, and Aurora was screaming and sobbing in hysteria. In order to save him, she pleaded with the rescuers to descend as soon as possible. The firefighters immediately made their way to the cliff's base in an attempt to locate Mark, but their search was severely hampered by the night's darkness and the uneven ground. Just finding the car, which was empty, took them 30 minutes. But they saw that the man had a serious head injury and there was a lot of blood. When divers signaled that they had found something at 6 a.m., the weary firefighters were about to give up after hours of unrelenting searching. Mark's body was 3 meters deep in the water, floating next to the car. Unfortunately, it was too late for the newlyweds when they managed to bring his body to the surface. After compiling a report on yet another regrettable incident along that particular stretch of road, the police closed the case. The body of Mark was taken back to his home country of Belgium. The young widow was in complete despair. She spent several days in a specialized clinic after being unable to handle the grief on her own. As Mark's family hurried to comfort her, she proclaimed that she didn't want to see anyone and cut herself off from the outside world. Mark's family didn't press because they understood her mental state. She had lost her husband on their honeymoon when she was 26 years old. However, her actions captivated Mark's family more and more in the days that followed. Slowly, suspicion replaced concern. His parents strongly objected to Aurora's insistence that her husband be cremated. She left the farewell ceremony earlier than anticipated on the day of the funeral, shocking the family even more. The relationship between her and Mark's family has grown more complex ever since. When she got back to the family home, she changed the locks and refused to let her mother-in-law in, who had come to pick up some of her son's sentimental but cheap possessions. Aurora listed the house for sale in the weeks that followed. In addition to the EUR 25000 she received from the sale of the house, there was more. After her husband passed away, it was discovered that she had gotten 7 insurance payouts. Aurora was given EUR 75000 in total. The Van Burr couple, who were shocked by their daughter-in-law's actions, took legal action and complained about the suspicious death. As a result, the coroner demanded that Mark's death circumstances be looked into. Investigators started by researching the couple's lives in order to comprehend what truly transpired that night. Mark Vander, 31, was employed at a reputable financial firm in Brussels in April 1994, about a year prior to the incident. Everything in his life seemed to be going well, or nearly so, and he had a great job, devoted parents, and amiable co-workers, but he had yet to find a woman he wanted to live a lifetime with. Mark wanted to start a family because he was old enough. In Brussels, Mark and Aurora met at a bar. Aurora was selling ironing boards door to door at the time, which wasn't a very lucrative job. There was immediate chemistry between Mark and Aurora. Mark was enamored with the attractive girl and fell in love with her right away. Their lively relationship left Mark's friends in awe and jealousy. Mark was shy, a little overweight, and uninterested in sports, whereas Aurora was very attractive, athletic, and fit. However, Aurora moved in with Mark a few weeks after they first met. Seeing that their son was content with her, the future husband's family embraced her as their future daughter-in-law and the mother of their grandchildren. When the young couple decided to tie the knot a year later, nobody was shocked. The girl asked Mark to put half of the house in her name, among other requirements for her future husband. Although this might have seemed strange or improper, Mark, who was incredibly in love, accepted all of the bride's demands. The young couple exchanged vows on March 11, 1995. Only the bride's twin sister was present from her side of the family, but the entire husband's family was present at the wedding. The husband's family gradually realized that their daughter-in-law avoided discussing her family and evasively responded to all inquiries about her background, education, and relatives. She acted as though she was from a wealthier family than theirs. More than a year after Mark's passing, on September 5, 1996, Aurora received an invitation to be questioned at the police station. She reaffirmed her earlier claims that she and Mark had gone to a chapel after dining at a portside restaurant. A wild animal unexpectedly leapt in front of their car on the way back. An unfortunate accident happened when Mark turned the steering wheel. Aurora opened the door and leaped out just before the car plunged off the cliff. No more information could be gleaned from her by the police. On October 8, 1996, Mark's body was exhumed in an effort to learn the truth. Some of the injuries were caused after death, according to the forensic expert. Although the body had many wounds, none of them were bleeding, suggesting that Mark passed away before the car plunged off the cliff. The widow was nowhere to be found when the police wanted to question her again. 2 years after the incident, the detectives made the decision to look into the crime scene in Corsica. The newlyweds' car plunged into the ravine, and Belgian police officers were at the edge of it. Armed only with photographs and without the car, the task became more difficult. However, the expert was able to reconstruct the car's pre-fall trajectory. A person's reaction to an unexpected event on the road, such as an animal running out, is to turn the steering wheel but not all the way around. Under no circumstances could the car have ended up where it was found if it had veered off the road and fallen into the water. The expert also observed another contradiction in the accident theory. When firefighters arrived on the scene, they reported that the bushes growing on the cliff's top had been crushed. The bushes would have been cut off if the car had sped down. It was clear from the crushed vegetation that the car had remained on the bushes for a while before descending gradually. Additionally, blood droplets were discovered unevenly distributed between the car and the water following the incident, indicating that the body was carried rather than dragged. Could an 80-kilogram man have been carried by Aurora, who weighed less than 50 kg? Aurora's version of events did not match the investigation's conclusions. The car was pushed off the cliff, according to the expert's conclusive findings. The investigators were now interested in learning what transpired following the incident. Did Aurora come down to assist Mark? Did she have the bravery and strength to go barefoot down the rocks? It was possible, as hard as it may seem to believe. Since Aurora Martin was a skilled athlete and a champion rock climber, the police found it difficult to deny that she had truly gone down to assist her husband. For them, it was a dead end. Since there was still no update on the young lady, the investigators made the decision to learn more about her past. Really, who is she? What secrets are concealed by her evasive responses? In actuality, the girl had a very challenging upbringing, devoid of both a loving family and a quality education. Her mother moved to Germany after her parents divorced when she was 12, so she hardly ever saw her daughter. Although her father was not very involved in her life, she led a carefree life with her 2 sisters. With lofty aspirations, the girl left her childhood home when she turned 18. Aurora entered beauty pageants in hopes of becoming a model, but was not very successful. She thus found employment as a bar hostess and occasionally as an escort service model. At the age of 24, Aurora made the most of her beauty and lived life to the fullest. In February 1993, she went to a rock climbing club one day as usual, where she met Peter Schwett, who would be her fateful encounter. He shared her love of mountaineering and was young, attractive, and wealthy. She was 24 years old and he was 23. At first sight, it was love. Aurora was able to move on from her previous life next to Peter. This tale sounded too good to be true. In fact, the investigators discovered an oddity while looking into Peter Schwett's past. He was a widower for a young man his age. The circumstances surrounding his wife's death were suspicious. 2 years earlier, on his 21st birthday, Peter was serving in the German army in Belgium. Peter liked going to clubs, and one night he met Ursula Deschamps, a young student, while he was out with friends. They fell in love quickly, and 3 months later Peter proposed to her. Ursula soon learned, though, that Peter was not content with a single woman. Other surprises were in store for her. At their house, Ursula discovered counterfeit documents and substantial sums of money. She wanted to tell the police what she had discovered. Their young marriage became strained, and they made the decision to file for divorce. However, Peter was supposed to teach his wife how to drive, so he and Ursula got into a convertible and left on a trip on the evening of August 29, 1992. The outing was peculiar for soon-to-be ex-houses. Peter was behind the wheel and driving as fast as he always does. The car crashed into a canal at high speed after he lost control. Although Peter was able to flee in time, he was unable to save his wife, who perished in the water with the car. He remembered that even though he touched her hand, he was unable to grasp her and drag her to the surface. A few days later, Ursula's body was discovered. Nothing from the autopsy would raise any questions about the girl's drowning. Peter provided a convincing explanation of how he had gotten out of the car through the rear window when the police recreated the crime scene. However, Ursula's family never thought it was a sad accident. First of all, Peter had never lowered the top of a convertible before. Second, Ursula could swim very well. An expert who later examined the case claimed that Ursula had time to get out of the car because drowning takes 3 minutes or so as the water fills the car. The Belgian police, however, handled it as a regrettable mishap brought on by the driver's carelessness. The case was closed after the young widower received a sentence of 3 months in prison. Investigators couldn't help but notice coincidences between two scenarios, 2 crime scenes and 2 cases. In both instances, a traffic accident occurred. The car ended up in the water after the driver lost control. While the other spouse's body was not discovered in the vehicle, one of the spouses was able to flee in time. Since Aurora and Peter were now the primary suspects in the murder of Mark Vander, detectives had an immediate need to locate them. Although investigators suspected Peter of Ursula's murder as well, it was possible to drop the possibility of charging him with the same crime again because Peter had already served 3 months in connection with that case. In the meantime, the police discovered the likely cause of Ursula's death and the reason Peter became so rich following the death of his wife. He was able to leave the army and woo the stunning Aurora after receiving an insurance payout of $1,500. After a year of romance, the young couple broke up in early 1994 for unspecified reasons. The girl registered with a marriage agency during this period. According to her, the perfect man would be well off, have a flat of his own, be amiable, and not be overweight. Her relationship with Mark Van Burr began in April 1994. The girl insured Mark in August 1994, 4 months after they first met. It's interesting to note that the documents had Aurora's signature rather than Mark's, indicating that he was obviously ignorant of this. She signed the paperwork on his behalf, claiming that his hand was hurt. Before long, a regrettable incident happened. After selling the house and getting the insurance money, Aurora vanished. She wasn't hidden for very long, though. Investigators discovered her trace in Luxembourg 2 months after Mark was murdered. She opened a bank account and deposited EWAR 275000 into it. She and someone named Peter Schwett were the only ones with access to the account. Had they gotten back together and relocated to Miami, Florida? Before, an article in a major French newspaper referred to them as diabolical lovers and detailed the police suspicions against them. The couple had been living a lavish lifestyle for nearly 2 years, complete with fancy apartments, cars, and a yacht. Peter and Aurora grew extremely wary. They only used telephone booths to make calls and altered their appearance. Before Peter was taken into custody in a supermarket parking lot, they were able to remain hidden for a while. He offered the police the roughly $50,000 he was carrying in exchange for their release, but they turned him down. Aurora was taken into custody by the police in the apartment where the lovers were hiding 2 days later. Aurora and Peter made every effort to evade extradition. Nevertheless, they were sent back to Belgium on December 3, 1998. Aurora declined to provide any testimony right away. In contrast, Peter talked a lot, but not much of it was accurate. The police had no hard evidence against them because they obviously did not want to cooperate with the investigation. An anonymous phone call altered the case's trajectory. Over the phone, a woman disclosed that she had information regarding Mark's murder. The woman was later identified by the police as Fabienne Lefevre. Aurora's stepmother, Fabienne, had recently split from the girl's father and made the decision to either get even or atone for her transgressions. According to Fabienne, she hurried to the hospital to console her stepdaughter following the tragedy in Corsica, but the girl who met her was entirely different, not even in mourning. Fabienne claims that Aurora told her everything. "It was all Peter's doing," she said, "and he handled everything." Peter and 3 accomplices, his German friends, pulled over Aurora and Mark as they were on the road. They used baseball bats to beat Mark. Fabienne claims that because Mark pleaded with the men to spare his wife and let her go, he was unaware of the betrayer until the very end. They loaded Mark's body into the car and pushed it off a cliff after the beating was finished. However, because it didn't fit Peter's personality, the police were unable to track down the accomplices or provide evidence of their existence. Furthermore, there were numerous questions regarding Fabienne's veracity. First, there was tension between Fabienne and Aurora. Second, why did she make an anonymous call, and why did she call the police sooner? She was afraid, the woman said. However, the police sought additional evidence because they were certain that Fabienne's words alone could not be used to build a strong case. Police in Germany discovered that one of Peter's brothers had postcards from Corsica and pictures of the car that crashed off the cliff. The interesting thing about these souvenir photos is that they were taken 6 months prior to Mark's murder. Was it deliberate planning, or just a coincidence? 4 years had gone by since the murder, but the specifics of the crime were still unknown. The police made the decision to recreate the airport crime scene on June 16, 1999. The vehicle was being driven by the driver at a maximum speed of 35 kilometers per hour. As if attempting to leap out, Aurora was supposed to open the car door wide. Even when the car slowed down considerably, she didn't do it. In an attempt to find an explanation for her failure, she lost her temper, started crying, and had hysterical outbursts. Peter stepped in and tried to protect Aurora. Since, in theory, he was not present at the crime scene in Corsica, it is unclear why he was involved in the reconstruction at all. Following this experiment, the researchers were certain that Mark Van Burr was murdered rather than killed in an accident. The trial started. A revised version of events was put forth by the defendant's attorneys, who claimed that Mark had a heart attack shortly before he fell from a height. Put another way, since he passed away just seconds before the collision, all of his subsequent injuries were post-mortem. This hypothesis had the potential to disprove the prosecution's entire theory. Such a version did not match the autopsy results, but even the forensic expert thought it was a smart move. Another crucial detail that the forensic expert disclosed during the trial was that Mark had not eaten anything for several hours prior to the crime. He was starving. The juror's last straw was when Aurora even made up a story about having a romantic dinner with her husband that night. Both of them were convicted. Peter received a 20-year sentence, and Aurora received a 15-year sentence. They probably didn't even complete half of their sentences. They were made available a long time ago. As of 2021, they remained together even after Aurora was forbidden from leaving the country, and Peter was deported to Germany. Peter secured employment as a carpenter, and Aurora is employed due to her multilingualism. The most amazing aspect of this case is that Aurora and Peter committed 2 nearly flawless murders. If Aurora had been a little more patient and hadn't slammed the door in front of her husband's family, the second murder would have probably gone undetected. She would have quietly left after a few months if she had continued to be the kind girl they knew, and the Van Burr family would never have suspected her of anything. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Hey guys, welcome to my channel, and today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. A prosperous physician living 2 lives, a future mother in need, a watchful twin sister. Additionally, an overheard conversation made the innocent victim aware of what was going on. This story had everything it needed to be one of the most dramatic. The media, however, mostly ignored it. The story, however, followed the finest traditions of Greek tragedy and took place in Ohio in the 2000s. It took not 1, but 2 deftly placed traps to capture the offender. whose behavior and intentions will cause you to reevaluate your level of trust in the people you let into your home and your heart. Michelle Baker was prepared to become a wife and mother at the age of 33. When her friend introduced her to the amiable young physician Maynard Mincing, happiness appeared to be imminent. The 33-year-old Maynard had prior married life experience. They had similar interests in medicine and a desire to assist others, because Michelle was an EMT in the fire department. Because Maynard was the ideal woman, successful, attractive, and charming, Michelle thought she had won the lottery. The relationship between Michelle and Maynard was like a fairy tale from today. Her boyfriend moved into Michelle's home in Hoover Heights, Ohio within a month. Maynard's children from a previous marriage would visit on the weekends. Michelle saw how happy he was spending time with his children and knew he would be ecstatic when she informed him that he would once again be a father. She was right. There were no limits to his joy. Maynard started searching for a new house right away so that the young family could live together, and he paid $320,000 for a beautiful and comfortable nest. When Maynard proposed that they go to Key West, Florida, where they would get married at sunset while standing barefoot on the sandy beach, Michelle was ecstatic. The enamored couple left for Florida, but Maynard changed his mind on the first day of their romantic weekend. In order to have a traditional ceremony with his family present, he requested that Michelle postpone the impromptu wedding. Michelle ignored this obviously fabricated justification because she still fervently desired to start a family. The two went to a restaurant for dinner that night. The meal went smoothly, but Michelle felt a sharp pain in her abdomen and saw some faint bleeding after she left. She was terrified that she might lose the baby, of course. She was relieved that there was nothing to be concerned about because her fiancé was a doctor. He asked her to try to fall asleep after putting her in bed. The pain went away the following day, but when she got home, Michelle thought it wouldn't hurt to visit Dr. John Shea, her physician. When the doctor confirmed that the fetus was developing normally, she exhaled with relief. Since it was Michelle's first pregnancy, he was sure she was just concerned. She was concerned that the fetus might be affected because she had endometriosis in the past. However, Michelle had a challenging pregnancy. Unidentified spasms and inexplicable bleeding became frequent occurrences, perplexing the medical staff who were unable to come up with a clear explanation. Maynard, who would soon marry Michelle and be the father of their child, thought it would be the ideal opportunity to confess his lingering feelings for his ex-girlfriend, Tammy Wynn, as if the physical suffering wasn't enough. To all of their friends, Maynard had painted Tammy as a horrible person, despite their complex past. As it happened, he was unable to forget her. After realizing that this was the true cause of her boyfriend's wedding postponement, Michelle valued his candor and chose to put even more effort into their relationship rather than break it off. But on July 1, 2000, Michelle's confidence in her future husband swiftly dwindled. Michelle stayed at home taking care of her own chores while Maynard went out of town to go fishing with a friend. Michelle switched on the radio and tuned into a local station, lost in her activities. She heard her beloved order a song for another girl, and it hit her like a ton of bricks. Maynard's voice sounded exactly like the caller. Michelle stood frozen, listening to the discussion with great interest. Michelle's heart fell when the DJ asked the man his name and he said, "Maynard." She was suspicious of her fiancé's true location. She requested a ride from her neighbor to Maynard's ex-girlfriend Tammy's house. When she saw them together on the street, her suspicions were validated. Michelle went up to the man and told him she was ending their relationship. When Tammy entered the discussion, she disclosed that she was unaware that Maynard was living with Michelle. "I'm staying with a friend," he had been telling her. The unfaithful fiancé was immediately evicted from Michelle's house. However, the man wasted no time in attempting to regain Michelle's favor. He called her a few days later and asked her to join him for a picnic so they could chat. He asked Michelle if they could reconcile and expressed regret for his error. She pardoned him because he seemed so sincere, but when Michelle became really ill, the picnic had to be called off. She was in such terrible shape that she was unable to even leave the park restroom. Her bleeding and cramps came back, but this time she also experienced the inability to keep food down. The doctor, who Michelle rushed to see, found nothing alarming. The doctor determined that stress was the cause of her symptoms after the ultrasound revealed that the baby was healthy. Michelle's twin sister, however, saw a fascinating coincidence. She asked Michelle if she found it odd that she was in excruciating pain whenever they were with Maynard. Michelle's sister's suggestion appalled her. She recalled that Maynard had poured her drink at the picnic before the second severe pain episode, and that he had brought glasses from the bar during their dinner in Florida just before she became ill the first time. With her drinks, though, what could he have done? Even though they had discussed the wedding once more and their relationship appeared to be back to normal, Michelle couldn't deny her sister's sensible observation. She also couldn't get rid of the impression that Maynard and his ex-girlfriend weren't entirely over. Michelle once again followed her gut and drove to Tammy's house, where her fiancé's car was parked, when Maynard informed her that he would take the kids to Florida for the weekend. Through an open window, she could hear a conversation between two people she saw inside. She was stunned by what she heard. Maynard responded that he thought he had already dealt with the child when Tammy asked him what he intended to do about it. Michelle came to the conclusion that the only way to keep Maynard as far away from the child as possible was to call the police. Michelle went to report her suspicions to the police. The detectives, however, were dubious after hearing her story and found it hard to accept that someone would try something so unbelievable. They had never seen anything like it in all the years they had worked as police. Although department rules forbade testing pregnant women, the police wanted Michelle to take a lie detector test. As a result, they rejected the notion and told her up front that, given Dr. Minsing's professional status, they would require strong evidence before they could arrest him. Michelle had to handle things herself because there wasn't much they could do in the interim. Michelle demonstrated her abilities as a true detective. With the assistance of a friend, she concealed a tiny video camera inside a fake plant on the kitchen counter and arranged the flowers so that it recorded everything that took place behind the kitchen table. Then, like all famous spies, she asked her boyfriend to join her for dinner and asked him to pour her a soda as she grilled steaks outside. Michelle excused herself under a false pretense and proceeded to the bathroom to pour the soda into a bottle after Maynard handed her her glass. She was horrified to find residue of some substance, not a tiny bit but a noticeable amount of some sort of drug at the bottom of the glass. She calmly poured the soda from the hidden bottle into the glass and went back to the table, trying not to show that she was in shock. However, Maynard kept getting calls from Tammy, so Michelle was unable to continue dinner in a composed manner. "Do you know why Tammy is upset?" he asked Michelle over the phone after he finally left. Michelle wasn't too worried about Tammy's feelings after finding out that her fiancé had been giving her drugs in her drinks, but when she gently inquired as to why Tammy was upset, Maynard surprised her once more by revealing that they had secretly wed earlier that week. Michelle's determination to protect her unborn child outweighed her feelings of hurt and rage over her beloved's betrayal. She immediately took the soda bottle to the police. An expert concluded that Cytotec, a drug used to treat stomach ulcers and induce labor, had been added to the soda. When used carelessly, though, it can also have lethal effects on the fetus. Legally speaking, the detectives had a problem even though they believed Michelle. They didn't have any proof that Maynard put the substance in the glass. In court, a skilled attorney would contend that Michelle falsified it in order to frame her cheating fiancé. The police therefore set up a trap for themselves. When the detectives asked Michelle to inform him that her pregnancy was going well during one of Maynard's phone calls, he invited her to dinner and gave her another dose of the drug. On August 14, 2000, two police officers hid in the garage while hiding a small camera inside a firefighter figurine that was placed on Michelle's kitchen counter. The police stormed into the kitchen and arrested Maynard for attempted murder as soon as they saw him trying to serve Michelle one of his special cocktails. "I hope these are prenatal vitamins," one of the officers said to Maynard, gesturing to the enigmatic material he was holding. The police discovered even more of the same substance in Maynard's vehicle. The doctor was forced to confess after laboratory tests revealed that Cytotec was present in the beverage. Maynard provided an apologetic justification for his horrible act, effectively acknowledging that he had poisoned his ex-fiancée in order to solve the issue. Maynard responded in the affirmative when asked if he thought the child was a problem. Michelle kept going to the doctor once a week and getting ultrasounds once a month. The fetus appeared to be growing normally in spite of multiple doses of the drug, but Michelle went into labor just before Maynard's trial, at 28 weeks of pregnancy. She gave birth to a stillborn daughter, whom she named Michaela. Michelle was surrounded by family and friends in the hospital room, where they were able to bid Michaela farewell and give her one last hug. It was impossible to ascertain whether Michaela's death was caused by Cytotec's effects, because the coroner could not detect any traces of the drug in the placenta. Prosecutors reached agreements with Tammy and Maynard to spare Michelle and her family from a torturous legal process. Tammy was given a 5-year probationary period and 100 hours of community service after acknowledging her guilt about getting the medication with a prescription while working as a nurse. Maynard received a 5-year prison sentence. In the United States, the two spouses would never again be able to work in the medical industry. Maynard startled the people in the courtroom during the trial by declaring that the child's death was the result of a higher power's intervention. In addition to displaying no remorse during the sentencing, and without pleading with Michelle for forgiveness, Maynard asserted that their daughter's death was the will of a higher power, and that the experience would make him stronger. His statement shocked even Judge Barbara Gorman. Judge Gorman said to Maynard, "I must say it was one of the strangest statements I have ever heard. You are a disgrace to your profession, in my opinion. All of this is the consequence of what you did. You must accept responsibility for what transpired." Although the spouses' sentences may be viewed as being rather light, Michelle is aware that Maynard will eventually face consequences for his actions in the afterlife. She made the decision to strike him where it hurt the most, his wallet, in the interim. Michelle Baker sued Tammy Mincing and Maynard Mincing for $3,500,000 in August 2002 over what had happened to her daughter. Orally and in writing, Maynard made it clear time and again that his goal was to get rid of the child. His spouse did not want him to be involved with the child in any way. Michelle's attorneys were therefore certain that they would prevail in the case. The success of Michelle's lawsuit is unknown, but it was made public in 2007 that Maynard filed for bankruptcy. In 2013, the Mincing name reappeared in the obituary of Maynard's father, a prominent local youth organization founder. Tammy and Maynard Mincing were still married and resided in Ohio, according to the note. Whether or not Maynard meant to murder Michelle is unknown, but at least he chose to end her pregnancy against her will. However, Michelle made it clear to Maynard that she did not ask him to be involved in the child's life or to provide financial support, so he could have accomplished his goals without his heinous scheme. He must have been aware of Michelle's strong desire to have children and cruelly denied her the chance to begin a new family life with a fresh start. And that wraps up today's chilling story. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe so you never miss a new upload. Also, let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.